In just a moment here, we're just going to flash up a little bit of reel of some recent work I've done here for Datto. While it's getting set up, I'll introduce myself. I'm Adam Berlingeri. I think I know some of you from Datto. I think I saw some of you at my previous I.O. that I did, which was 20 years of digital video in 2 hours or less. It actually became 2.5 hours because that's how these things always work. We're going to try not to do that tonight so much. So we'll play a little minute-and-a-half reel of some recent stuff that I and my colleagues here at Datto have done. And it's coming up in a moment. And then I'm going to do a quick presentation as quick as I can to get us all on the same page about what we'll be doing tonight. And then from there, we'll start shooting some video. Sound good? Yeah. All right. Jason, we ready for that video? All right, let's hit it.
What the hell?
Welcome, friends, for another episode of Joy of Assembly.
It is not! It is not! It is not!
Man, that's beautiful.
All right. So, again, hi, I'm Adam Berlingeri. That's a bit of what my team and I has worked on the last few years here at Datto. I'm the production supervisor for an internal AV productions team here in the office. I also do short film work on the side, a little bit of freelance stuff here and there. Jason in the back is actually my boss. He's kind enough to come in after a long flight today to help me out with this. So everyone, let's say a quick thank you to Jason. And my lovely wife in the front row here has been making sure I've been eating this whole time. So, and supporting me till 9 o'clock last night. So I'm like, hey, does this sound right? So, so thank you very much. Today I want to talk a little bit about just some of what goes into making short films, whether it's for purely entertainment purposes, if it's for corporate work, like a bit of what we saw here, or anything else in between. A little agenda of what we're going to go over tonight. We'll get into a few pre-production documents. Some of you have those in your seats there. If there's any spares, if someone doesn't want one, there's a couple extras in the front row. We'll go over some roles and responsibilities on set, and we'll actually assign some of those roles out. So we'll have sort of a camera team, a lighting team, and a sound team, and we will need 2 people to act as actors as well. So we'll do some volunteers and member of the audience picking for that momentarily. After that, we'll do the video shoot and a little recap at the end. Feel free to ask questions whenever. I'm definitely going to be blazing through a lot of information because any one topic in this I could talk about for hours. So I'm going to try to really consolidate best I can. If you have a question, throw a hand up, and we'll do the best we can to get as many of them answered as possible. So, again, Adam Berlingeri. I've been doing video work since I was about 14 years old. I won a Student Emmy Award when I was 18 for a project I worked on in high school. I majored in tech theater at WestConn. And while I was there, I got a merit award from the Kennedy Center for work I did for a stage play where we incorporated live video. I also did some documentary work after college. I was a featured artist at an arts group in Hartford called RAW. I've done a few years in a row now the 48-hour film project, which is where you have 2 days to write, shoot, and edit a 4 to 7 minute short film. Very intensive, very insane, but a hell of a lot of fun. Am I talking too fast? I tend to do that. We okay? All right, I'll keep going then. I started here as a tech support guy, actually, for the first year I worked at Datto. Then I became a just video editor, and after a while I was writing, I was shooting, I was directing, and I became lead content producer, and now production supervisor on my team. And I'm also certified in Adobe Premiere Pro. Okay. All right, that's the hard part, I think, actually. So we're going to start off with a script. I wrote this a couple weeks ago. We have a one-page script. A good rule of thumb with scripting is that 1 page of script is about 1 minute of screen time. That depends partially on how much of it is stage direction versus dialogue. So we will need to cast 2 people for this. We're all going to read through the script together before we make that selection, so we'll all get an idea here. So we have 2 characters. Charlie, who's a boss character, needs to talk to his or her employee about something, and Morgan, who is asked by their boss for a chat and is a bit nervous about the conversation. So does someone want to temporarily be Charlie and someone want to temporarily be Morgan, just to read through with us here? All right, let's do Charlie and Morgan. So if you guys can read through here, everyone can follow along.
Where is Morgan? Do you want to be Morgan? No, I'm just looking for whoever Morgan is.
Okay. All right. So I'll read the stage directions real quick. Charlie brings Morgan into a room with 2 chairs.
Take a seat.
They sit across from each other.
Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Please, call me Charlie.
Great, thanks, Charlie.
Do you know why I've asked you here this evening?
I can't say that I do.
We've discussed this before, Morgan.
As I told you, sir, that wasn't me.
Then why do we have you on camera stealing pens from the supply room?
They're pens, Charlie. Nobody cares.
So, I'm glad people are laughing, because the hardest thing for me to do is when I have nothing, like a blank page, just to write a 2-person scene. It should be easy, but when you suddenly have to, it's like, what can 2 people talk about? I got nothing. So I figured a scene like this would be simple to shoot, relatively speaking, and also the basis for most drama, comedy, whatever, is 2 people talking. So what we do here tonight should be applicable to a lot of different cases. So from the script, we then develop a storyboard. Some productions, I don't do a storyboard, I'll just do a shot list. So if I was rushing through one of these for a quick Datto turnaround, I would probably skip this step and just do a shot list, and I kind of know in my head what I want it to look like. But I actually made these storyboards in an app called Storyboarder, very creatively named. It's a completely free program. Windows, Mac, works on both. And this basically lets you can doodle into it directly. You can actually print out pages like this with pen, pencil, markers, and then scan it back in using your phone to the app. It's got a lot of flexibility. It's made by just like 2 dudes, so if it's buggy, you just gotta deal with it. But they have this awesome 3D engine in it where you can basically say, I need a guy, and hey, there's a guy. I need him to sit in a chair. Okay, now he's sitting. It's like all template-based. It's very easy to work with. So I did a storyboard that takes us through everything, and I did this the way that I would edit it. So this is how I imagine it's going to come together in the end. But you notice that some of these shots are basically the same shot. It kind of cuts back and forth a little bit. So obviously when we shoot this, we don't want to have to jump back and forth, changing where the camera and the lighting is back and forth. So we're going to do, instead of individual shots, we're going to worry more about what's called setups. So I've divided this, and it should be on your copies there, into 3 setups, setup A, B, and C. The A setup is going to be the wide camera. We're going to shoot that first. I've already kind of put that together here. And the idea here is this is the shot that will cover all our bases. So if we run out of time to get every shot we want, if nothing else, we have every line of dialogue covered in the wide. So that's like a step 1, just to make sure you've got your general coverage. You've got your wide. If everything else goes to hell, at least you've got that. From there, we're going to do all of the shots that focus on Morgan. That's going to be setup B. So whether it's just the over-the-shoulder looking at him normally, if it's a funky angle when things get more intense later on in the story, we're going to do all those grouped together. And then finally, we'll end on all the shots of Charlie. Same thing, the over-the-shoulder first, and we'll get into the special shots, the more creative shots as we go. So this is page 1. Page 2, you have as well there. It has a couple different alternate angles for things. So for example, when Charlie confronts Morgan about being caught stealing the pens, I set up this kind of crazy wide angle from below and kind of diagonal. So it's this real odd angle, and it's going to make Charlie look like a giant on camera. Like Charlie is like standing over Morgan, scolding Morgan. So we actually have a little bit of thought and sort of cinematography built into this, and we'll talk about that a bit more as we go through. And a realistic thing to keep in mind is that depending on how this goes tonight, because things always come up on set, Murphy's Law is very real, there is a chance that we may not get to shoot all seven or eight shots that I have on this shot list. And this is basically that storyboard kind of set up into a schedule of how we're going to do things. So we have it grouped by setup A first, setup B, setup C. I do these shot lists, and my columns change occasionally, but for this project, it made the most sense to have my setups in order, the shots I want to get within each setup, what size the shot is, being it wide, medium, close-up, what angle, if it's dead-on eye line, which is your standard, or if it's coming from above or below. We'll get into that a bit more as we go through. A quick description of what lines or actions each shot will cover. And then I have here listed which characters appear in each shot. The reason I do this is because if you're shooting a scene with more people in it, and let's say someone has a time constraint and needs to move on real quick, I might sort this out. So I might say, okay, I'm going to get every shot that has Morgan in it first, because Morgan, the actor playing Morgan, has to leave sooner. Does that make sense? So that's one way, if you know you have a limited time with a person, you can try to just prioritize all of their shots first, and having a shot list that mentions which characters in each shot helps you do that more easily. Props, I threw in that we could have, Charlie can have a clipboard as just something else to interact with in frame, and I listed that here, which shots we'll need that for and which shots doesn't matter in. And then we have a few notes I listed for the wide. We want to record the full exchange beginning to end. If we need to stop or like reset midway through, no big deal, because we're going to cut back and forth from it. I did a few fancy things here. We don't have to get that deep into it, but if possible, these are kind of like the wish list items over in the notes there. So again, shots versus setups, change your setup as infrequently as possible, because just zooming in or changing a lens on a camera is easy, but when we change angles to those other setups, we're going to have to move the lights, we're going to have to move the chairs a little bit, we're going to have to move the camera, we're going to have at least 10-15 minutes of downtime whenever we change a setup. So from that standpoint, you want to change those as infrequently as possible. So our three setups are going to be setup A for the wide. I already have this one sort of put together here. We have a wide angle lens on the camera, which for our camera is going to be a 24mm lens. And we've got two lights set up to cross light these actors here. I'm not going to get too much into like traditional like 3-point lighting and a lot of things you may have heard in that regard, because we're going to try to make the scene, we're going to shoot this unnecessarily dramatic. And we're going to do that for two reasons. One, because it'll be ironic, and irony is always funny. And two, by having less lighting, it lets us do what's called low-key lighting. Usually that means you have only one light source or fewer overall light sources. There's a lot more shadows. It's a lot more cinematic, but it also means you get to use less lights, which is a plus. So high-key lighting is the opposite, where the entire scene is lit really well. You'll see this in any comedy ever, pretty typically, and that means you have either a large number of lights or a very even amount of lights surrounding the set. So there aren't really any shadow areas. It's less dramatic, and again, it's the typical formula for comedies, but like I said, I like irony, so we're going to do this in a dramatic way. So that's setup A. When we finish that, setup B is going to be an over-the-shoulder, going over Charlie's shoulder, looking at Morgan. We're going to use a new toy of mine, which I'm very excited for, which is a large lantern light, which can actually shoot light in 360 degrees. We're going to set it up so that when we switch from setup B to setup C, that light doesn't have to move. So we're going to cut down our time when we reset between those two setups there. And aside from that, in theory, this light's going to be bright enough that all we'll need to fill in sort of the shadowy side of their faces is going to be a reflector. I'll go over a few options for that momentarily. Does all this seem to make sense more or less so far? Yep. Perfect. Yes?
How do you get the audio to mix? Are they going to shoot them in different? Are they going to talk through A, B, and C?
Great question. So we will record audio on each take. The over-the-shoulders will only be primarily capturing audio for the person we're focused on at those times. The other person will still speak. We'll still hear them a little bit in the background of the raw footage, but we won't kind of be tuned into them. And that way, when we go to do the edit later, we're editing like the best audio of each person. So there will be just as much audio editing work as there will be video editing work, strictly speaking.
One loud and one soft. How do you get rid of the soft one and put the loud one in a different audio?
Sure. If they start overlapping each other, like talking over each other, then you have an issue. And I have dealt with that. We're going to avoid that problem tonight. So I intentionally wrote a script where no one talks over each other. But I've done events before, sort of unscripted storytelling type things where there's 6 people, they're talking over each other, they're laughing. In that case, we had every single person had a mic on. So yeah, everyone's mic was picking up each other. But if let's say someone's laugh was like really loud and annoying, I could mute their mic and just get what ever came through on the other people's mics. You know, it blasts through a little bit less intensely. You know? So there's always tricks. You have to kind of make your decisions as you go. But the name of the game here is really creative problem solving. As you go on through anything we do with this stuff, you're going to keep finding new problems and you're going to keep finding new solutions. And that's actually one of my favorite parts of it because my mind always has to be working. I'm always thinking of contingencies. My plan today was to set up all 3 of these setups, test them, and then put tape on the ground where the lights and camera need to be for each of the 3. That way when we switch, we could just move stuff real quick. Did not have time to do any of that. So we're going to move through really quickly. And as I said, we have a shot list that enables us to say, okay, we're running a little low on time. So we're going to skip some of the fancy shots and just get the essentials, the wide, the over the shoulders. So if we run low on time, we might have to go that route. But that's a realistic concern that comes up often. And sometimes it's because you're only paying your actors for a certain amount of the day. Or if it's like here where we're borrowing employees from their proper jobs to come do a silly video for, an hour and a half. I need to know that I need to work around people's schedules to an extent. Sure.
If you had 3 cameras, could you do them all at the same time? Put the 3 cameras all in?
Generally, yes. You would have to change the setups a little bit. So, for example, I can't do the wide shot with the lantern right here because I would blatantly see it in frame. Yeah. So it's really going to be about how do I make sure I'm not seeing any equipment in the background or reflections of any equipment, etc. Now, if you have the right space, and one important thing to do is do a location scout in advance, in the right environment, I could, for example, let's say I want to light a whole group of people right here. I could take that lantern I have over there, and I could put up a couple of these ceiling tiles, sort of just use some tie line or something like that to tie it up to the frame of the ceiling tiles, and I could drape that right over the audience and get a whole portion of the audience lit pretty evenly. So again, it's getting into the space with enough time in advance, doing your planning as best as possible, and having contingency plans. That make sense so far? Cool. So moving on through these here, we will come back to these slides whenever we change setups. You'll notice that in all of those shots, I'll go back just one again, the camera is always on just one half of the characters. This is due to something called the 180-degree rule. The 180-degree rule denotes that if you have 2 people talking, you draw an invisible line down in between them, and you keep the camera to one side. The point of this is it keeps the audience from getting disoriented as to the geography of the room. So if you shoot everything here for a start, then all of a sudden you jump to the other side, it kind of looks like someone turned around or they're facing the wrong way all of a sudden. It's a general one of those like basic 101 rules that usually is pretty effective. The only time you want to break this is if you have a motivated reason to. So let's say the guy in the red shirt suddenly betrays the person in the blue shirt. You might have a shot where the camera moves behind him and it's like, oh, it's a double cross, we've broken the line now, we've broken the expectation. So it's important to know the rules. There are times to break the rules and kind of play with the format a little bit. But again, we only have about an hour and a half. So we're going to keep moving. So roles and responsibilities here. So we're going to have basically 4 groups. The first is going to be actors. I am going to try to set up everything in this room, so no matter what role you're in, you can see a little bit of everything, which means when we're not shooting, actors can come see what we're doing on camera, etc. for every other role. Are there any 2 people who would be interested in being the actors for the scene? You 2 guys? Perfect. All right. We'll stick with the pros. I like it. So the big job I'm going to have for you is by the time we're ready to shoot in about like 10 minutes or so is try to know the lines as best you can. You can have the sheets of paper and throw them under your chair, right before we start shooting. That's perfectly fine. So next up is camera crew. Camera crew is going to be 2 to 3 main people. We're going to have a camera operator who will be responsible for framing, exposure, and focus. And then we will have 1 to 2 assistant camera or first AC, second AC. Their job is a little less glamorous, but they're going to do a couple major things. They're going to do the slates, which are those clapboards you always see in the behind-the-scenes things in movies. That basically denotes to the camera and to the sound crew what shot and what take we're on. And that way, when we go to edit, both the audio file and the video file have a reference. And that sound, that clap sound, is how we synchronize the 2 together. So this is one of those things that's easy to forget to do, but when you have it, it makes the editing process so much smoother. And I've definitely done shoots where we've rushed and haven't done it, and I'm sitting there trying to go frame by frame and synchronize the first syllable of a word that comes out of someone's mouth. Not a lot of fun. So they will do the slates. Whenever we change a setup, we're also going to take what's called a color card, and I'll show an example of that in a minute. And then either the first AC or a second AC is also going to do the super glamorous job of logging for us. Now, logging is something that no one really likes to do, but anyone who logs their footage is an editor's best friend. Because what that basically means is, I just did a paper version of this sheet. This is going to have the shot number, the take number. There's going to be one of these for every slate. So if we do 6 takes of something, there's going to be a listing here for every one of those. And it's going to have for each take and shot the file, the video file name, the audio file name, and then there's fields here for a description or notes. So it's like, this shot went great until this putz messed up his line. So, for example, and you might mark on here, this was the good take. And that makes it so that later on in editing, when the editor goes through all the files, he doesn't need to import every single one of them. He just needs to import the good takes. Make sense? So not glamorous, but very important. And again, we'll rotate some things around so different people can do different things a little bit, because no one wants to be the logging guy the entire time. Lighting crew is next up. We have grips and gaffers are the most common roles in that realm of things. They're going to be responsible for light placements, light intensity, and set safety. So one thing I did not do, because again I was rushing a bit today, was normally when we have cables on the ground like this, over here and in this entrance here, we always either tape these cables down using gaffer's tape, or we'll put a rug over it, something that just prevents tripping hazards as much as possible. Most of the lights have sandbags on the stands. The lights themselves in the stands are heavy. So generally speaking, we want 1 to 2 people who can kind of manage it, someone who can spot the other. If one person's carrying, the other guy can come in with a sandbag right after it's put down. So that's something we can easily have 2 to 3 people working on. And then when we're setting up our shots, they'll also manage the intensity of the lights and kind of work off the camera operator or the director of photography's directions on how to aim and how to intensify the lights. So that's the lighting crew. In the sound crew, we're going to have a sound mixer and a boom operator. There can be an assistant here as well. The sound mixer will generally handle the audio recorder, maintain the sound levels for each person's microphone, and they will also work with the assistant camera person to make sure the log is up to date. So again, that log person is going to get down the file name and the audio file name whenever we finish a take or start a take. And that will be important for later on in the post-production process. The boom operator is going to be the guy with the pole holding the mic in place. It always seems like a weird job, but holding that thing up actually gets really tiring after a while. So it's a matter of kind of just keeping it steady and keeping aimed in the right direction. The biggest trick of that responsibility is if there's something like, can everyone hear there's air conditioning running in the room right now? Are you also freezing like I am? Okay. So that sound is going to suck on our microphones, kind of no matter what we do. So the real trick will kind of come to if, let's say, the main vent is like here, you might want to put the microphone a little closer to where it is and aim it away from the vent towards the actor. And that's because when you use a boom pole, that's used with what we call a shotgun mic, which is very directional. It's going to pull audio primarily from where you're pointing it and almost not at all from the opposite side. So by kind of putting it away from the noise you don't want, you can actually get a lot of flexibility as far as how much bad noise you're avoiding. So all this being said, is there anyone here who's particularly interested in being on camera crew? Okay, so we have 2 people right here, 3. So 3 to 4, all right, so why don't you 4, tentatively we'll have a couple people switch off for camera, we'll have a couple people switch off for assistants. Maybe when we switch setups, we'll switch roles also, that way everyone gets to kind of touch everything at least once. Does that sound okay? All right, so when we do break to go over here, I'll have you guys kind of congregate around the camera. Next up for lighting crew, this could be 2 to 4 people very easily. Anyone interested in lighting? We got 1? Just 1? 2? 2.5? Okay, so all right, so we'll do a couple of you guys primarily. And here's the thing, anyone who doesn't pick a role, you have 2 options. You can sit and watch, totally okay, or you can be PAs. PAs are every set's best friend. A PA, it's the intern, the gopher. I've never made a PA be the coffee bitch, because no one wants to be the coffee bitch, but a PA can literally do a bit of anything. And being a PA, a good PA, is very valuable, because you get to touch a bit of everything and learn a bit of everything. So I know you had your hand raised before. Let's get one other person to be a primary grip. Someone else okay with being a primary grip? Or those lighting crew. So 2 primary lighting people I'd love to have. I know you raised your hand. One other? All right, let's do you, sir. We'll get you, and then other people can swap in and out as we go. All right, so that's lighting crew. And sound crew. Do we have anyone who's interested in being a sound mixer? Justin? All right. You as well? All right, so why don't we have the 2 of you will be the 2-person sound crew, and you can switch off as you go during some of the different setups. Does that work? All right, so on to what everyone has to worry about. For the camera guys, step 1 is framing. Who here has heard of the rule of thirds? Okay, just about everyone? Okay. Rule of thirds, again, Camera 101 basically says you want to divide your frame, this bigger square here, into little tic-tac-toe shapes, similar to what we have on the actual camera right here. And generally speaking, you want the subject of the shot's face or their eyes to be on one of these dots here. And this doesn't matter if it's a medium shot, a close-up shot, or an uncomfortably close shot. So that's the rule of thirds. The next thing the camera crew has to operate is the exposure on the cameras. This is a sheet I can actually email to anyone. I made this for a friend who is a photographer trying to first learn how to do all the manual settings on their SLR camera. This is how we measure exposure on photography, video cameras when you're doing it all manually. Shutter speed, aka shutter angle, aperture, aka iris, and ISO. I'm not going to go too granular into what it all means here, because for video, we tend to lock down certain elements of this. So the shutter speed, aka shutter angle, we're going to lock down to either 1/48th of a second or 180 degrees if it's shutter angle. They mean the same thing. Film video is shot at a certain number of frames per second. It's how many still images are captured per second. And for the cinematic look, what's used for pretty much any movie you've ever seen, is going to be 24 frames per second. It's really 23.98, but we'll say 24 frames per second. And you either want, so that happens every 1/24th of a second. Your shutter speed for the cinematic look should be 1/48th of a second. So twice as fast the shutter flaps open and close every time a frame is taken. Again, getting too technical, 180 degrees means the same thing as this. Your camera will have one of these two things. If you're shooting a film style thing, lock your shutter speed or shutter angle into this. End of story. Moving on. Aperture iris, this is generally controlled on the lens. This is how much the opening on the lens is open or closed and how much light it lets in. So this is a very easy way to control how much brightness you're getting on your shot, but the side effect is it controls the depth of field also. Depth of field is when your background is out of focus, when your foreground is really in focus. I have an example of that in a second. And ISO is basically how we make up the difference. ISO is the digital setting on the camera that controls the sensitivity of the sensor that's capturing the image. This is the easiest way probably to increase and decrease your brightness, but every camera has a native ISO. It's like the preferred ISO it wants to be at. If you're at that or lower, you're golden. If you go over that, you start getting digital grain or noise in the picture, and it looks unprofessional, basically. So the camera we're going to use today has a native ISO of 800, so we're going to keep it to 800 or lower for our ISO. And as I mentioned a second ago, I went a little out of order here, sorry. The way we measure our exposure on camera is with a few tools. The most common is the histogram. I have one of these up here right now. The way a histogram is broken down is that from left to right on this camera, it shows you the blackest parts of your shot, the shadows, midtones, highlights, and whites. The important part when you're shooting like this is you have to make sure that anything you want to see is within this range and not falling off of one side or the other. If part of your shot is too dark and this is all the way to the left, that detail is going to be lost and you cannot get it back no matter how much cleanup you try to do in post-production. Same thing, if you shoot it too hot or too overexposed and the histogram is clipping off of the right side here, that information is too bright, you're not going to be able to get it back. Generally speaking, the only thing you want to let clip past the white point or black point is if, let's say, there's a light in the background of your shot. It's an actual source of light. It's going to be very bright. That makes sense to have it clip off the edge. Aside from that, though, you want everything to be somewhere in this range. And if it's not, you're either under or overexposed. Make sense? Yep. Okay. So, on some cameras, this will be denoted vertically. On some, it's denoted horizontally, which is super confusing, but it's the same thing either way. You'll see pretty quickly if you put your lens cap on and take it off, which way it moves. That's the easy test right there. The cameras also have things called zebra. A zebra pattern is basically any parts of your shot that are too bright or are clipping off the high end of this histogram. We'll get this little pattern on it. It's an easy way to tell really quickly that, hey, this is too bright. I don't use this very often because I'm just very comfortable with a histogram, but it is something that almost every camera has, even like consumer-based, like cameras you buy at Best Buy and whatnot. And then some professional cameras also have something called false color. I don't use it very often, but I'll hit a button real quick just so you can see what that looks like. So if you look on the middle TV there, that's false color. It's basically a color chart that shows anything that's exposed properly, quote unquote, is going to show up somewhere between this green and pink color. Anything a little underexposed is going to be more towards this blue and purple. Anything overexposed will be towards this yellow and red here. So we are shooting fairly dark, so I'm not too upset about how this looks right now. We have plenty of blue in the shot to show that it is dark, but none of it's purple, so none of it's like going to clip off, is in danger of clipping off the edge. Does that kind of make sense based on this little guide here? All right. False color, not every camera has it, so generally speaking, I'd advise not to worry too much about it. The histogram is going to be your best friend, and zebra is something that every camera is going to have, even if you don't have a histogram. So these are your two easiest tricks to use rather than just eyeballing it. Depth of field, I mentioned a second ago, when you do your aperture and iris, I'm going to speed through this a little bit. Depth of field, if you think of a chart with an x-axis horizontally, a y-axis vertically, and a z-axis, which is your depth, the distance from me to you, sir, for example, the depth of field says from this range on the z-axis to this range, my shot is in focus. You can shoot with a wide depth of field, which means that more of the shot will be in focus from front to back, or a narrow depth of field, which will make it so that you have less in focus at any given time. An example of this is a shot here with a wider depth of field. Our subject is in focus, but you can generally make out what's in the background. It's a little bit blurred, but generally speaking, I see there's part of a Dado logo, there's a staircase, there's people, this makes sense, it's easy to understand. A shallow depth of field, on the other hand, this background is blown way the heck out. Now, A, this can be very artsy, and B, it also really points out, hey, here's what you're supposed to be looking at in the shot. This guy is the important part of the shot. But if you go too narrow with your depth of field, if he leans forwards even like a ½ inch, he might go out of focus. So that is something you have to watch out for. And one way, aside from, again, trying to eyeball it on the camera, that you can tell if you're in focus or not, is with something called focus peaking. Again, not every camera has this, but when you find one that has it, it's beautiful. This actually is active on our live shot right now here. You see these red lines kind of tracing around some elements? A camera with focus peaking will basically look for sharpness in a shot, and for anything over a certain threshold, meaning anything that's in focus, you'll get a little red or green outline depending on the camera you have. So this is how we're going to tell for sure that when our people sit down in their chairs, they're going to be perfectly crisp in focus. And we'll play with that once we have everyone in their places. Everyone doing okay so far? Cool. All right, so the assistant camera, as I said before, is going to have two main responsibilities, slating and color cards. The slate, whenever we do a new take, we're going to get a slate. We'll grab a little dry erase marker, and we're just going to write on it. We'll probably just do shot number, take number. We'll keep it real simple. We don't have to fill out everything on here necessarily. That being said, we're going to need to do this once per take. And again, when the director calls roll camera, rolling audio, the camera and audio people will each confirm that they are rolling, that the timers are moving, and then the slate's going to come in, say, shot one, take one, click. And then we're going to hear that and see it on every audio file, every video file, and even if we don't have a log, that's how the editor's going to know what goes together and how to sync it all up. So that is a very important job there. If there is a case where we forget to do it before we do a shot because we're rushing, there's also something called a tail slate, which just means before you yell cut, you just take it and do it right at the end. Yeah, that's an acceptable option too if you forget at the beginning. The other thing we're going to do is once per setup, we're going to get a color card. This is a small card about this big. It comes on a necklace, so you can't lose it. Whenever we change our lighting, we get a quick shot of one of these from where our subject will be sitting. And the point of this is that this tells the camera what's green, what's blue, what's skin tone, what's white, what's black. This is basically a reference. So if let's say you're shooting with two different cameras, it doesn't matter if you have every setting on the cameras exactly the same. Every different camera, even sometimes different models from the same manufacturer, the color will be different on them. So having one of these cards, which I think they run about like $80 or so, basically ensures that when you go to edit, you can match every camera no matter what make, model, how old it is. You can make them all look identical, essentially, in editing. Color correction, basically, which is something for another day. Some editing programs actually have a partnership with this card, so you can basically just draw a box around this section and it will automatically figure it out for you. It's great when it works. It doesn't always work, though. So more often than not, you use a version of those histograms we mentioned before. There's versions of that for brightness and color. in the editing software. More often than not, you're going to use those on a shot of this and match it out that way. Very time consuming, but cool stuff. That'll be another day. We can talk about that. So again, once per setup, we'll do that. And this particular thing is called an X-Rite Color Checker Passport, if you want to look for it on Amazon or something. So moving on to the lighting team. These are some of the toys you're going to be using today. Some of these are my babies, so I'm going to ask you to be very careful. And some of the heavy stuff I'll probably be spotting just because some of it's brand new and we don't have any releases here, so you break it, you buy it. So anyway, our primary lights, the lantern I mentioned is using a lighting instrument called an Aputure 300D Mark II. This is equivalent to a 2,000 watt light bulb. Traditionally speaking, but it's LED, so it doesn't get too hot. And this is like, if you're shooting outdoors on a sunny day and the clouds come in, this will be your replacement sun for you. Like, that's how cool this thing is. We have to attach to it both the lantern, which we'll be using today, and although we probably won't use it, we also have what's called a Fresnel lens, which just sort of intensifies and makes it more like a spotlight. But the lantern basically softens the light and lets you shoot it in as much as 360 degrees. So for our later setups, so we don't have to move as much around, we're going to put this right in between both people, and that's it. Very simple setup. We have also for this initial shot, because we can't put that lantern anywhere in the wide shot because we'll see it, I have these two KinoFlow panels. KinoFlow is the brand. These are panel lights. These are softer by default. Light hardness or softness is measured by how big the area the light's coming out of is. So a very small spot like this, or a spotlight, is going to be a very harsh light. The shadows are going to be really dark and intense. A wider light surface, a wider surface area like these panels or this lantern will soften shadows. They look also a bit more like beauty lighting. They're more flattering on the face and everything. So we're kind of using a combination here just for like the right tools for the job kind of scenario. If we need a backup for X, Y, or Z reason, I also have a few battery-operated lights. One's called a Westcott Ice Light, which looks sort of like a lightsaber. It's pretty cool. And we have from a brand called Luxley these two small battery-powered lights called a cello and a viola. And those are pretty slick. Those actually change color and everything. We may not use them at all. We might use them in a pinch, but they're available as like a backup option. Yeah, moving on. For grip gear, this is all the stuff that goes with the lights to support them. This is some of what we have to work with today. We may not use all of it, but we have it all available. We're going to use C-stands, which are our lighting stands. These are heavy duty. They're heavy in and of themselves. These are going to support the weight of all the lights we have. We're still going to put sandbags on the legs of them, just so if someone bumps it by accident, nothing will be too top heavy. We have for the lantern, there's a boom arm that's going to allow us to kind of hold it out over where the actors are. That will also require a sandbag just to counterbalance. We'll go over that when we go live. Gaffer's tape, the most useful thing on a set. It's like duct tape's cooler kick-ass cousin. It's a fabric-based tape that I don't know if it's actually flame resistant at all, but if you put it down on a carpet, like down here, it will eventually just become part of the carpet. It's used in theater, it's used in lighting. If you leave it too long, the stickiness is kind of disgusting, but it's like the most powerful tape you can find. It's not cheap, but it's beautiful to have in any sound or lighting kit. I actually have some on my back right now holding my microphone in place, just so the cable doesn't get snagged. So yeah. We also have things like spring clamps, which are very common to have. These are like 80 cents at Home Depot, very good to have for X, Y, like any reason you can imagine. We have something called black wrap or cinefoil. It's basically, if you look directly behind you, that light there, there's a piece kind of attached, like that crinkly black substance there. It's basically just matte black foil, like aluminum foil. And if you have a light that's kind of going everywhere and you don't want it to go everywhere, it's a great way to kind of tone down the light or focus it in on someplace you want it to be. Even if you buy like cheap lights, like if you get something from Home Depot just to use for video lighting, it's great stuff. You can kind of just wrap around it to shape the lights or kind of cut off where it's going to hit. So it is a good thing to find. And it's, again, it's a cinefoil is what you could find it for on Amazon or other websites. We also have, if we need to soften or block some light, we also have flags. There's a couple set up. I'll show you as we go through what those are for. And we have reflectors. All right, moving on. This is, I think, the last slide before we start shooting stuff. Sorry if that's long-winded. Try to get as much information as I can in people's heads while we can. So for the sound team, we have some recording gear, including a Zoom H6 audio recorder. This is a beautiful device that can take in, by default, up to 4 microphones can be plugged in. You can plug them in via XLR cables or 1/4-inch cables. So you can actually plug like a guitar into this if you have it going through an amp in advance, too. It has some very fancy built-in features. We're just going to use it to record our sound. Strictly speaking, if you're only recording with 1 to 2 microphones, some cameras will let you plug XLR cables from the mic directly into the camera. This camera we're using tonight will let us do that. So if we wanted to save time or make the shoot a little less complicated, we could record our audio, our good audio, directly to our video, and then we would completely get rid of the use for this. But a lot of people here, and I'm sure someone wants to know about audio, so we'll actually spread out the jobs a little bit to make it a bit more open-ended for everybody. And yeah, and this actually comes with a whole bunch of extra attachments, but we're going to basically just use it to capture our main shotgun microphones today. For the shotgun mic, we'll have a boom pole. Pretty self-explanatory. We have headphones. Someone should always monitor audio. Even if the little bouncing level meter looks good, always, always, always wear headphones. Because I've had more than once where I've recorded something without listening, and it turned out I had a bad cable and all the audio is staticky. So always have headphones on. You never know. Always make sure you're working with good gear. You have good sound as you're going. And for that first wide shot, it may not be practical to use the shotgun mic because, again, there's not going to really be any place to put it where we won't see it. So for that very first shot, we might put a wireless lavalier mic on the two actors somewhere subtle because, again, it's a wide shot, so we won't see too closely if it's tucked under a collar or like on one side of their body. So we might use those as well. And that's basically a wireless set similar to what I have now. You have a mic pack you wear on the actor. And then either something like this or a clip-on mic we could put on a shirt, a sleeve, whatever. And that's all our main audio gear. So this is what all of our crap looks like if we put it all in at the same time, but we're going to make it simpler. So again, setup A, we're going to roll into that in a moment here. I'm going to take some things. Do we have anyone for the camera crew who's willing to get started with the logging job? All right, so if you volunteered for a job, let's have the camera folks go over to the camera setup over here. Let's have the lighting folks go back to one of these lights that's on in the back of the room. And the sound folks, if you meet me by this table, I'll get you all oriented. All right. Hi, team. All right, so over here, we're set up. And if anyone wants to listen in on this, this is absolutely all meant so everyone can see and hear as much as possible. So feel free to crowd around and everything. I'm going to go through each of the stations and kind of just show everyone what we're working with here. So this here is a Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro. This is a relatively speaking inexpensive cinema-grade camera. It's all digital. It shoots up to 4.6K. And this is set up so you can plug microphones into this, long-lasting batteries. The camera itself, which is basically from here to here, runs about $5,000 or $6,000. From there, you have to buy the lenses separately. If you want a viewfinder, that costs extra. If you want a battery, that costs extra. So to put together the whole kit can get pricey, but this brand also makes a baby version of this called a Pocket Cinema. Also shoots 4.6K, but it's about the size of a DSLR camera, so about yay big and that deep. That is only about $1,200 or $1,300. You can attach a whole bunch of different lenses to it, different batteries, etc. We actually have a kit. The whole thing fits into a carry-on size hard case. And you can literally, I have in this kit a camera, 2 lenses, 4 batteries, a couple of microphones, some lights, a whole bunch of stuff. Sorry about that. I'm trying to figure out how to make this all generally visible here. And thanks to my buddy Jason in back, we are trying to record this. So if anyone needs a recap after we've done this, we're going to have this on Vimeo in the next few days probably. So this camera here, very flexible, can do a lot, looks great, very nice wide range of how many colors and lighting levels it can shoot. And it's going to be our main guy today. Something like this from a brand like Canon or Sony, just the body of the camera might be $18,000. So relatively speaking, this one is fairly cheap. We have a couple of these here at Datto. This is definitely one of my babies. I love this camera. And the Pocket one is more for when we travel. We use it a lot. It's not as nice. Like there's certain things that just don't work quite as well on it, but this is like our workhorse when we're around the office. So it's my baby. Be very careful, guys. But yeah, what we're going to do with this here is a few things. The simple, obvious stuff is you start recording, you stop recording. There's a button here for that big red button. Even on the screen, there's this little gray circle here. If you tap that, it'll start recording. Tap it again to stop. Very easy, like every camera. Focus and the aperture control, the iris control, are all done from the lens on front here. So who wants to be our first camera operator to start off with this first setup? All right, so if you come here for a second, let me just show you what I'm talking about. I'll show everyone best I can on this here. So there's 2 rings on this lens here. This is what we call a prime lens, meaning it does not zoom in or out. It has one focal distance or one like angle it shoots at. And this is a fairly wide lens at 24 millimeters. The millimeters is how we measure the width or narrowness of a lens. So this prime lens here has 2 controls. The front one is for focus, the rear one is for the aperture. So this one here, if you look on the screens, or I guess the middle screen back there, you'll see as I change this, the brightness is going to change a bit. Yeah. So, sorry about that, everyone. So for this wide shot here, I don't want to have the background too blurred out, so I'm going to set this to an aperture or iris setting of f4. f4 is sort of medium to medium wide. It's going to ensure that my background, those chairs are still in focus, because that's kind of a cool texture, those curtains and those chairs back there. So I want to still see those. I don't want to cancel all that out. In the over-the-shoulder shots, we're going to really blur out the background, and we'll see how to do that here. So this is going to stay at f4. You should be able to see the 4. Yep. And these lenses are great. This is a brand called Rokinon. These guys put all the measurements on both sides. So if you have a camera and a camera assistant, they can both see what they're doing here. And the front ring is for the focus. So as I turn this, you'll see on the screens those focus peaking lines coming in and out to show when we have elements in focus in the shot. So that's, again, our reference for how we're going to monitor all of this. For the camera and camera assistant, I have the built-in LCD screen on the camera, and then we also have a separate monitor right here. People can look at the other monitors around the room too. And we're always going to make sure we have some ability for people to see what the camera sees, because that's really the most important thing at the end of the day. I'm not going to spend too much time explaining this, but these cameras are shooting log, which generally means that the footage is going to be a little flat looking. It's not going to be very contrasty, and it's not going to appear very colorful. In post-production, when we edit, we can stretch out all of that color and make it more interesting. But the way this records using that log mode basically captures more color data than you would with a traditional camera you buy off a shelf at like Best Buy, what have you. And there is a way to preview what that looks like here. So if we look back on the screens again, or any of these monitors, I'm going to toggle between this is how it's recording, and with sort of a template for the color setup, this is how it could look in post. So we get a little bit of a preview of how cool this may look later, even if we're shooting it in sort of a lame way to start. So that I have sort of preset in there. I'm going to leave it on just so we kind of have a better expectation as to what our brightness, our exposure is going to look like. So again, main responsibilities once we have people on set are going to be managing the focus, starting, stopping the recordings, and as we do those shots with people kind of moving to their chairs later, it's going to be making sure they're on the right spots on that those rule of thirds line that we have here. Yes?
For you. So obviously we're shooting with the shadows on this side. You're going to use a color checker. Where would you put your color checker in reference to make sure that it's lit properly for color-wise in this shot?
So that is a good question. That is going to be a challenge for this shot. It is one that I had thought about previously and decided, meh. So a color checker isn't always absolutely necessary. It's good to have for sure. For this, I will probably set it up, I'm going to say angled this way a little bit so this light picks it up. So if my hand is here, it won't show up, but if I go to like this spot, it'll show up a little better. So we'll probably have to do something a bit more like this. It's not opportune, but this will give us like the best reference, generally speaking. And again, in a pinch, we can eyeball it, but generally speaking, in a less dramatic lighting setup, you'd have a light somewhere in front of people. It would be less complicated. When we do the over the shoulders, that'll be much easier to capture. That was a very good question, though.
Very creepy in there.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're doing sort of non-traditional lighting setup here. As you can kind of see, I've got the setup so we're edge lighting the people. It's kind of dark silhouette. We want people, when the two characters first come into the scene, to feel like it's something ominous, and not until the punchline about stealing the pens we're going to realize, oh, hey, this is a comedy. Again, we're playing with irony for sure. And this is a bit more dramatic than your typical lighting you'd see in something, but I thought it looked cool and shows something a little bit different than what you'll often see in like an introductory filmy type course. So we're sort of cross-lighting and edge lighting everybody here. And each of these lights is pulling double duty, because that light is obviously hitting my face on this side, and that light's hitting this person's face, but it's also giving me this nice crisp edge on the back of my head here, and it's really, despite the fact that I have dark hair, it's separating me off the dark curtains from the background. Does that make sense? So again, because in this shot, everything's in focus, we need other ways to tell the audience what they're supposed to be looking at. And by kind of using the light to frame around the characters like this, it helps them pop out and kind of pull more attention. So if there was, instead of curtains back here, if there was a whole room full of people eating lunch, for example, we'd want a technique like this, or using focus to separate our subjects off of the distracting elements of the shot. So, yeah, so for camera crew, if you're the first operator, you'll be responsible for starting and ending the recordings. As you go through, there will be a reference for our what shot or file name we're on. So I'm going to record here for a second. This is an example. So I've hit a record button. We're going to record a few seconds here, and I'll stop again. If on the inside here, there's some playback controls. There's like a rewind play. Yeah. If you hit play, it'll switch to playback mode. And we will see here the first shot listed. So there's a really long file name associated with this. Oh, apparently when I switch to playback mode, it doesn't show all the information on that screen. So for the person who is actually on the camera, the proper monitor here, there is a file name listed. So I'm going to need you to either read this off to the person taking the log, or they can kind of look over your shoulder and see it as well. I don't believe that's going to show up here either. Yeah, so whoever's going to do the logging to start is going to want to come around this side. And what we can do here is sort of just a way to start this off. I'm not going to write down the whole file number. I'm going to write down just the fact that it started with 001. And then they're just going to roll down from there. That'll make it so we don't have to stop and check this out every time we stop recording here. So I'm going to write just shot take number XX, video file name 001. There was no audio file name. Description, test shot. So that's the first thing on the log sheet right there. So who are our camera assistants again to start? Okay, you there? So I'm going to have you start off with the logging just at the beginning here, and when we switch setups, I'll have you guys switch off. That way, you each get to do a bit of everything here. So ostensibly, our first audio file is going to be 01. We have an offset. Yeah, so we'll just kind of have that reference so we can easily find them afterwards. So that's the main stuff with the camera. So focus, framing, exposure, we've kind of already locked it in. We're not going to change that until we change setups. For lighting, let me have my lighting crew come back over here. All right, so we're starting off with these two KinoFlow panel lights here. Just checking my time real quick. Okay, so yeah, these KinoFlow lights, they're big panels. The controls for them are on back of the lights. I'll take a couple of you over here to see. I think we might have a camera view that can see what I'm doing. Yep, so we have on the TVs up here a little bit of a reference. I'm going to pull this down a bit here just so it's a bit more visible. So there's a bunch of buttons on this thing here. The only things you really need to worry about are this button that says Kelvin/dim. This is how bright the light is and what color temperature it is. And then there's this knob here that controls everything. So right now, this is set for 100% dimming. I can rotate this up or down to change how intense the light is. Make sense? We're not going to play too much with color temperature, but generally speaking, hitting this button would switch it to that mode. You could change how warm or cold the light looks. So that's that part there. I'm going to raise this and re-aim it a little bit again. I'm going to have one of you stand by each of these lights, because when we sit actors in the chairs, we might need to adjust the angle a little bit here. These C-stands are set up, so you always want to loosen the lowest screw first, because that's going to be beefier. So if we need to adjust the rotation or the height of this, if you brace up here and loosen this guy, one of you wants to put a hand on this just to feel how heavy it is about as a reference. Yeah. Okay? If you want to feel that too. So that's how much weight we're talking about with this here. So whenever you loosen the screw, you just want to brace yourself for the weight. This should be locked in now. So we should be aimed about right. The reason why I have all this other stuff here around this light is because when I take away this piece of black fabric, if you watch the camera view on the TVs, it's not too bad right now, but in that top corner, there's a little bit of a glare up there. This is going to cut that down a little bit. This was actually way more intense of a glare earlier. And when I'm looking here while I'm operating this is I'm just kind of seeing where it's falling on the chairs, because I still want to get the edge of this person's hair here. So I'm going to open this up just until I can see all of that chair and the lights, and then I'll lock this back down again. The other light doesn't have anything on it because it was far enough back behind the pillar that's not getting into the camera at all. And then again, this foil that's here, I just put this on because the light was so close to these curtains. We had a lot of bright blue on the curtains right here. So that foil I put on is just to cut off that light spill. So we have our lights focused in nicely. So if one of you wants to hang out by each light here, again, we may need to tweak levels as we go. And did you see that control I mentioned before for the brightness? It's just that knob on top should be accessible. All right, let's get our actors in chairs. And I'm going to touch base with my sound crew here. So for the actors, that storyboard should reference who was sitting in which chair. Oh, they are? Are they out there? One of our PAs want to go grab those guys for a sec? All right. I can have my sound crew people over in this direction. All right. All right. So, where's my audio people? Let's come over here. So this is the recorder we're going to use here. On-off switch is here. You have to kind of just flick it downwards for a second, and it turns on. This is all running off battery here. We're going to plug in headphones into this, just for monitoring as we go. All right. So really, in this first shot here, at the very beginning at least, the only line we have to capture is the take a seat, but we do want to have a copy of this for the duration. So for this wide shot, because we can't get a boom in there, I'm going to put a wireless mic on both people. So we have a couple things we need to set up here. Each person is going to have a transmitter and a receiver. So these are the transmitters here. We've got number 1 and 2. There's 2 clips on the sides of this that you pinch together to open it, and there's an on-off button to hold. So if you want to take that one there and get that one turned on. And these are the receivers. These are going to turn on the same way.
Tell the difference between the receiver and the transmitter?
There's this like peg thing on the back of the receivers. That's made so you can mount it to a camera if that's how you're doing things here. So for these transmitters here, each of these packs has a mic with a clip on it. Yep, there's one right there. So I'm going to have one of you take this. So these, when you put them into the transmitter, they pop into this top slot here, and then they screw in to secure. So normally we run this underneath closed. We're going to speed through a little bit today and be a little sloppy with it. Yeah. So we've got each of those, and then on the receiver end, you're going to plug in one of these cables, same thing with this little screw there. Yep, and the other end is going to go into the recorder on the sides. So the recorder itself is labeled as a 1, 2, 3, 4. So we'll put receiver number 2 into number 2, receiver number 1 into number 1. Justin, if you can start plugging those in, I'm going to have you come with me to mic up the people. All right, so. Hello, talent. So we have mics for both of you here. So for this shot, we're going to clip a mic on you because there's nowhere to hide a microphone elsewhere in this frame. So we're going to be a little sloppy with this just because we're going to try to push through and go fast. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to run this, if we can, underneath the outer shirt you're wearing. Actually, you know what we'll do? If we unscrew that cable for a second there, we can have you just run this business end down your shirt.
I like how you call it business end.
Yep. Yeah. There's a trick about putting microphones on people because it can be very uncomfortable kind of running cables on people, clipping things onto people. So an often good method to use is to kind of introduce yourself to the person properly first, make eye contact, make it a comfortable introduction. And that way when you say, hey, can I shove this thing down the back of your shirt? It's a little less weird. Sometimes I break the ice by making bad jokes. So if the mic cable is dangling down by someone's knees, I say, excuse me, I'm going to grab your dangly bits here. Sometimes that helps, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the person. So you have to know your audience a little bit. So I'm going to keep this kind of casual and just clip it onto the lapel of your shirt here. In a proper setting where we're taking more time, we would try to hide this a little better. With some proper accessories, you can mount a microphone like this underneath a shirt also. But for these specific mics, you get too much rustling sound from the clothes touching it. I've plugged this in so you can pocket this, you can clip it on, whatever you feel comfortable with. For something like an interview, this is how we would generally mic people up. We'd run a cable under the shirt, clip it on, and a good note for mic placement is, generally speaking, if you make a thumbs up and put your thumb where your mouth is, where the bottom of your hand is where you should clip the microphone. That's the rough distance you want to go for to get a decent audio capture. So normally if someone has a button-down shirt on, if I may here for a second, if we count down from his buttons here, we go 1, 2, 3 buttons. Between button 2 and 3 is a good place to put it.
Are we pretty good?
Yep, we're pretty good. These microphones are a little bit directional, so I'm actually going to flip this one just up so it's pointing towards your mouth here. And generally speaking, we've clipped both of these mics to the sides of them that are away from camera. So there's a chance someone's looking really closely in the wide shot, they might still see a hint of it, but as long as we have it not blatantly staring at the camera, we can probably get away with this pretty cleanly. So, I've talked long enough. You guys are pretty comfortable with your lines at this point?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna finish verifying with the audio guys. Did you guys know what you have to do? Is there anyone who doesn't feel ready to shoot yet?
Do you want to do a rehearsal on audio? Because I do have to do that scream or that intense moment, so I don't want it to peak.
You don't have it to go too crazy with it. And again, we'll record it. We'll record it kind of at one level first, and then when we do like the close-up of it, then we'll get a bit more particular about it. So, yes.
One thing I'm noticing is you have the characters, they're really dark, and then you have the chairs back here, they're really bright.
Yes. I've chosen to do that intentionally for this particular shot. That's something we wouldn't necessarily do for every shot you go into here. I just thought the stacks of chairs looked kind of cool along with the curtains, so I left these little puck lights on intentionally here. I just made some choices of things I thought would make the shot visually interesting and sort of went with that. So, for when the actors come in, I'm going to have your path inwards is going to be from between this row of chairs. So Charlie will lead the way in, Morgan will follow. So you'll come in, and I believe you're going to the far chair according to the storyboard. So go to the far chair and be like, Charlie, you may sit. And you don't super want to have this conversation because you personally think it's kind of dumb. And you don't want to be here because you're like, fuck, what does he think I did? So again, that's just a bit of internal monologue for you to sort of start off with there. And generally speaking, when we have experienced folks working on camera, lights, etc., the director will sort of set them on their way with what the next thing to do is. And for the next setup, that's a bit more of what I'll do. I'll send you guys, hey, here's what we're aiming for. Get started, and I'll catch up with you. And while you guys are all doing that work, I, as a director, will talk to the actors and kind of figure out those pieces of the equation there. Does that make sense for everyone? All right, so let's get you guys to your first mark right back there. Hang tight till we go for action. You guys know what you have to do for camera, right? The actors, can I have you in the chairs once more for a second? We're just going to verify our focus and verify our audio levels.
While they're walking to it, are they walking from behind or?
They're coming in from that side there, and they're going to sit. So the camera doesn't even need to move for this, strictly speaking.
Yeah, they're fine.
Yeah, and a trick here is if you double tap on the screen, it'll actually do a temporary zoom in, and you can scroll around to see a bit more in detail here. So I'm looking for the edge of the hair, the nose, the teeth, those elements to make sure they're in focus. The chairs I don't care about, but as long as their faces are coming out, then we're good. We're golden. So, Charlie, I'm going to do a quick sound check for you here. Give me your first couple of lines. Just ramble off in a row. So he's coming in really high. So we're going to turn him down. Where we want him to be is about -6 right there. Okay. That's our golden spot because it's not too quiet, not too loud. If he's between like -12 and -6, that's good. Give us a couple of the lines one more time.
Then why do we have you on camera stealing pens from the security supply closet?
All right, that should be good. And Morgan, can you give us a few of your lines, please?
2.
Thank you, Mr. Parker.
And just keep going.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie.
That seems to be around -6 right there. So that should be good. When you're ready to record on this, just the big red record button. When you're done, hit the stop button.
Once per take, basically?
Once per take, yeah. And you'll get here, I believe, an indicator with what file number we're on. So I'm going to do a little test one right here. So Zoom 01 is our pros.
That was our test run, right?
Yep.
So-
And I'll hit stop there. So we've leveled everyone out. So when you hit record, you'll see the new file number. And again, if we just give the logging person the number, that's fine. Like the last 3 digits, it's fine. All right, so I'm gonna give you this here. You two guys are just gonna monitor this for this take. When we get to the boom pole, then we'll switch it up a little bit, okay? All right, so we're all ready to go. Everyone has their jobs. We're gonna have you guys go back to your first mark there off on the side. We're gonna come through and just see how far you can get through it. If you get hung up on a line, just restart from the beginning of that same line again if you can. All right, sound good? Everyone ready? All right, let's roll camera. And roll audio. Both rolling? Yep. Perfect. Let's get the slate. We'll have you come just in front of the chairs a little bit.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep, we can see that in focus. So you're going to say scene 1, take 1, and you're going to, shot 1, take 1, and you'll clap it.
Shot 1, take 1.
Perfect. You'll clear frame. And action.
Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Please, call me Charlie.
Great. Thanks, Charlie.
Do you know why we've asked you here this evening?
Can't say that I do.
We've discussed this before, Morgan.
And as I've told you in the past, it's not me.
Then why do we have you on camera stealing pens from the supply closet?
They are pens, Charlie. Nobody cares!
We'll let it roll for a few more seconds. Sorry, I stepped on his line. That was my bad. So whenever we reach the end, we'll always roll for a few extra seconds there. It's called tail footage. Same thing at the beginning. From when I say roll to when I say action, we're getting some head footage. It gives the editor a little bit of playing room to play with their cuts. So let's cut camera and audio. Okay.
So I'm seeing the histogram and it's like peaking here. Is it at the end or is the left?
For this particular, so it's not all the way over.
Yeah,
It's indicating that most of the shot is dark. That's why this is so tall. So there's a lot of shadow. Yeah.
Yeah, so the left part is the extreme.
Yeah, all right, so we should be okay there. In general, this is a very dark shot, but try to remember roughly where that histogram is, even if you take a picture with it on your phone, because we're going to try to match the rest of the shots to be similar to that. Make sense? All right, so let's do one more take here. In some cases, we do 5, 6, 7, 1,800 takes. For this, to keep things moving, I'm only going to do 2 takes of each shot, but what I always do is I shoot until I get a perfect take, and then I do one more for good luck. Because you never know, like, when an actor might pull something brilliant out of their ass. And it's like, oh, hey, we got an even better take. Awesome. So generally get as many as you need, and then get one for good luck if time permits. So let's just go in here for a take 2. If we've updated the slate, let's roll camera, roll audio. Yes.
Mic 2 is really
Hang one sec.
Mic 2 is really quiet.
Okay.
Should we start him up loud or turn it up and then as he
Should I
gets
ride the
loud?
mic? Make more
Try to get to a decent in-between level. I wouldn't write it too much throughout. If you really need to, you can. But try to get it somewhere that's like a good average for him. Yeah, that's what I'd recommend for now. Yep, perfect. All right, let's get that slate.
Scene 1, take 2.
And action.
Take a seat.
Thanks, Mr. Parker.
Please, call me Charlie.
Great. Thanks, Charlie.
Do you know why we've asked you here this evening?
Can't say that I do.
We've been through this before, Morgan.
In the past, I've told you, it wasn't me.
Then why do we have you on camera stealing pens from the supply closet?
They are pens, Charlie. Nobody cares.
Awkward.
And cut. All right. I'm going to ask for one more take, and I'm watching for things that could lead to continuity problems. So I saw you cross your legs over a couple times in different directions. To make sure that we have consistency when we go to the other shots, if you are going to cross your legs, cross like right over left or left over right and keep it, and then just remember what it is for all the rest of the takes. Decisions like this are important to make when you do the wide shot, because in the close-up shot, I may not see as much of the detail, but you want to have your consistency, and this is the best time to find your potential continuity issues. So I do want to do one more take, so if you do cross a leg, cross it, keep it that way, and remember which leg it is for future takes if you can. And for this one, 2 other notes. When you guys come in, hit the take a seat, but don't proceed to the next line until you're both sitting if you can. It'll make the editing a little bit easier later, I think. And when you say the thing about they're pens, Charlie, no one cares, stand up when you say it. It's like, God damn it, man. No one cares. You know, like you can stand up out of your chair when you say it. Yeah, we'll take it a little bit bigger, all right? All right, so we'll do one last take, and then we're going to move on. All right. Let's roll camera, roll audio. Both rolling? Okay, let's slate.
Scene 1, take 3.
And action.
Take a seat.
Thanks, Mr. Parker.
Please, call me Charlie.
Great. Thanks, Charlie.
You know why we've asked you here this evening?
Can't say that I do.
We've been through this before, Morgan.
And as I've stated in the past, it wasn't me.
Then why did we have you on camera stealing pens from the security supply closet?
They are pens, Charlie. Nobody cares! God damn it!
Cut. All right. That was really good. Good job, guys. All right. So it's a great job. We did have some laughing over here, obviously, but hopefully the mics are far enough apart, and also with the other takes we got also, hopefully we can dub in some audio from another take and hide the laugh. I've dealt with it before. A little messier for post, but we can absolutely work with that, generally speaking. So, great job on the first setup, guys. We're going to reset for setup 2. I'm going to need to work closely with the lighting crew and the camera crew for this new placement we're going to do here. Go ahead.
In regards to audio, because I know you're going to be jumping between scenes, are you going to do like room tone or anything to kind of capture?
We will, yeah. So we'll usually do room tone at the end. That is a very good question. Room tone, for anyone who doesn't know, right now, if I go to edit their dialogue, and let's say I mute everything that isn't them actively speaking, you'll hear a little bit of the air conditioning noise from the background cut in and out, and it comes out sloppy. So what we tend to do is, with the same mics that they're using and from about the same positions they were standing, we will set them up stationary and record 30 to 60 seconds of silence, aka room tone. This basically lets us fill in all those gaps we get when we edit the dialogue and make it seem like it's all one smooth line of dialogue without any weird cuts happening in between. Make sense? Thank you for reminding me about that. It is also something that everyone forgets all the time. It takes 30 seconds. The hardest part is getting everyone set to shut up for 30 to 60 seconds, because usually someone will like look at something on their phone and go, heh, or something stupid like that. So, all right, so that's setup 1. So what I'm going to ask for the next setup here is we're going to have the camera crew is going to handle moving the camera. I'm going to work with the lighting crew to move the lights. We're going to work together as a collective unit. Everyone else, feel free to kind of see what everyone's doing, but I want to keep the circle fairly open just so no one trips over these cables as we start moving here. So what we're going to do here is I'm actually going to unplug anything that's tethering you down, and I'm going to have you set up. Okay, that guy died. Everything else should be active still. We are good. Okay, so who here on the camera crew has a shot list or storyboard on them right now? Okay. Excellent. Okay, so for setup B, if I recall correctly, we are going to shoot all the shots of Morgan. So Morgan is the gentleman in this chair here. The first thing we're going to do, if I can have the 2 actors back in their spots again, is we're going to have the camera set up shooting over Charlie's shoulder towards Morgan here. So the rough placement for that camera is going to be pretty much over his shoulder here, looking directly at Morgan. We are a bit against this pillar. So if we need to, if there isn't enough space to make this work, we'll actually cheat a little bit. We'll shift the guys forwards one way or the other for a moment here. So for moving the camera with something that's expensive, the way to kind of do this safely is we're going to have one assistant camera person taking any loose cables like this. Someone kind of keep a hand on these guys here. We're all going to move together as a unit. So if you want to hang on to that, I'm going to have the camera operator, as best you can, keep a hand on this handle. It's a kind of a tight squeeze. Yep, good call, thank you. So we'll put that on the camera for now, is perfect. Yeah, that can dangle. That's an extra cable we didn't need today. So you're gonna hold from there, and I want either you or another assistant to hold underneath here on this part of the tripod. That's gonna be your maximum stabilization to keep it all moving together. Okay, so if you two can move as a unit, we'll bring that over in this direction here. We're going to set up right about as close to this pillar as we can get on this side. We are going to switch lenses. That's going to be the next thing here. So for lighting, we're going to break down these 2 Kinoflow lights, and we're going to set up this lantern. So for each of these, if you can lower them all the way down, and then there's a power button on the back of each. If you can toggle that off, that'll be our first step there. I took someone's shot list here. I think that was yours. So I need one of the lighting guys here to assist me. We're going to move this stand here. I'm going to give, can I give you, sir, this sandbag for a moment here? It's about 15 pounds. I'm going to set this up right about in between the 2 of them. Okay. That should be a general good center point. And we're going to set this up. This is a more advanced version of the C-stand we were working with before. If you want to come over and see this as well, sir, you can leave that all there. So this is... The base of this is the same C-stand we worked with before. We've attached a boom arm to it, similar to the boom we're going to use for the mic. And Justin, over there, I've got a case, a black nylon case that says Sennheiser on it. That has the shotgun mic. And there should be a boom pole. I'll come get you set up with that in just a minute. So we have this sandbag we put on a leg. That's good there. So I have a couple controls on here for extending out this arm, and we kind of want to do this generally over the two of them, but a little bit closer to this side, because we never want to light anyone directly from the front. We want to kind of go for like 45-degree angles where possible to get the most interesting shot. So this, distance-wise from them, isn't too bad, but we are going to want to raise it up. So I'm going to take the same thing we loosened before here.
Let's start with the bottom one.
Yep, this actually is the bottom one.
Yep.
Because again, that's going to be the beefier one here.
Yeah,
this
no,
is
no,
just a rig to, oh, great, sorry.
No, I wasn't.
No, it's fine. And we're actually just about at the ceiling there, so that's about our max. So I had unplugged before. There's a cable that we're going to run over to this. I think I have it back here. Yeah, the guys who designed this light were kind enough to give you very long cables with it and to make it so the control box is midway down the C-stand. That way you don't have to reach up to the light to turn it on and off here. I'm going to plug this guy in on bottom. All right, so everyone avert your eyes for just a second. This light is bright as hell. All right, so that's about 50% brightness for this light. So we're going to do a couple things. I want to move this a little further away again. And the balance on this actually feels pretty good. It's not leaning too much one way or the other. We can test that by loosening the rotation of the boom arm here. It's got a little bit more weight on that side, but it's fairly evenly spaced. If we want to keep this a little cleaner, I have just on the other side of that pillar there, I have a few more sandbags. Could one of you grab me another small one?
Heads up, I don't know if we did the color checker.
We didn't on the last shot. I skipped it for the last one. For this one, we'll probably grab one here. All right. So I'm going to add one more sandbag to this just to give us a little extra counterbalance and make it a little bit safer all around the board here. So if we take a look at how this looks on camera here.
Yeah, I think we might want it higher up, right?
Yeah, we can go a little higher up. So to do that, there's 3 height controls, or sorry, 3 leg controls here. It's all the way down right now, so we're going to loosen all 3 of these here. And I'm going to raise it up to roughly the right spot. And if someone could tighten down those legs for me. Okay, and then just to verify the camera's level, this knob on bottom, you were lifting it from before.
Yeah.
Do you see right about here, there's this little level?
Yep.
If I loosen that knob, this will actually rotate and you can get it just about center. All good?
Is there a bubble you're centered?
Yep, there's a bubble level right on the tripod there. So that's thing number 1. Thing number 2 is we're going to change lenses for this shot. We want this to be more of a close-up shot on Morgan. So I have right back there that black case on the floor is the lenses. We're going to switch lenses because, again, these prime lenses, you can't zoom in or out. So we're actually going to change which lens we're using to shoot this scene.
I'm guessing if we use the like telephoto or something, we will lose his shoulder.
We're going to kind of play a little bit and see what fits best. I had planned originally for an 85, but I expected to be a little further away here. So we're going to try a 50 millimeter first.
Should we get the extension?
Oops. There is another one back there somewhere. And again, for the sake of speed, I'm swapping our lenses out real quick. And that cap we're going to put right on there. Thank you. So this is a brand called Rokinon. They are cinema grade lenses, but they're relatively cheap ones. So a set of like 4 of them might be like $1,200 or $1,300, but you're getting 4 lenses where you could easily spend that much on a single lens from some other brands. Okay, so you got the lens cap there. Basically, yeah. So if we see on the screen now, we're a bit closer to that medium shot of Morgan. And we might want to shift this over a little bit because we have lost his shoulder. So for the sake of just clearing our space here, you can actually loosen this handle and drop it down a bit. So we've got that remaneuvered a little bit here. So let's see if we can carefully, again, with the camera and one of the assistants, if we can shift this camera over to the left a little bit, just to get a little bit of Charlie's shoulder back in frame. Actually, we do have a little bit of his head there, so we don't want to go too far, but that's not bad right there. And then to tilt this up and down, we're going to loosen this wheel here. That loosens in that direction here. So if you loosen that, you should be able to lean the camera up or down a little bit. All right, so we're really close to you, so we have to keep in mind that if you turn your head to the right, you're fairly much so blocking camera. So you're going to want to sort of stay fairly trained on him. A good tip for your actors when you're shooting a scene like this is for over the shoulders, try to have them look at each other in the eye, but crossing to the opposite eye. What I mean by that is try to think of it as you have your right eye is looking at his right eye. And that's basically having your head turn ever so slightly towards the lens. That way it's actually kind of situating you in a better spot. So obviously you'll never look at the lens, but by keeping eye contact with him in this way, you're close enough to where the lens is to have it be like a featured shot for you specifically.
Can I ask?
Yes.
Actors in these shots, they're not sitting into the shot, correct? They are coming from wherever in the scene where it would be relevant to have the close-up of either character.
Generally, yes. So for this, if I... So for right now, for what we're doing on time, I think we're going to try to just get each of these over the shoulders for the entirety, because it is a short scene. If we have time, maybe we'll go back and get one special shot from each angle, but I don't want to take too much more time because I know we are running a bit late in general. Again, I'm sorry, that's how these things always happen. All right, so a couple things have changed in this shot. For one thing, the lights we had set up before were a different color temperature than this light is now. Those other lights, you can actually change their temperature. This one you can't. That's the trade-off for the power. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to adapt the white balance, or what color the camera is reading. So right now, the camera's set to almost the same white balance as this light is. So to change it here, on the screens up front, you should be able to see I'm tapping at the top of the screen where it says WB 4000K. 4000 Kelvin is a measurement of color balance. So 4000 is about the same as fluorescent light. 3200 is about the same as traditional like yellowish light bulbs that you'd have in your home. And then 5600 Kelvin is what daylight tends to be. There are variances with all of these, and we do have things like color meters and spot checkers where we can verify lighting, but we're rushing a little bit here, so we're gonna speed through. And again, this time we are gonna get a color card, and that will give us some reference for exactly what we wanna do with this in post. So I want this light to look a little bit warm, so I'm gonna overcompensate towards the blue a little so that we'll see on these screens here that the people's faces look a little bit warmer. Exactly, right? And when I tested for this before, I had the camera set to about 6400 Kelvin. That's beyond like a natural range, but it's about the same distance in Kelvin as the camera was from where the lights were, about 800 Kelvin off. So since this is 5600, this light, we're going 800 Kelvin above it. Before, our lights were 3200 Kelvin, and we shot at 4000 Kelvin. So I'm the same distance relatively away. Does that make sense, math-wise?
Is there like a trick to that, by the way? Because I feel like we're always battling white balance.
It can be a little tricky, and there's so many things involved in it. It's really generally just having consistent color temperature between all your lights, the camera, everything. I intentionally want to warm up the shot a little bit, so I'm pushing my luck a little by doing this. But again, I'm artsy-fartsy, so whatever. It gives you a reference point. So in theory, if we had the color checker on the last shot and on this shot and on the next shot, that would be a great way to verify. But it's all really relativity. So we're in a great environment right now because we're controlling all light in this room. There's no windows, there's no real spill. We might be getting a little bit of spill from out here, but nothing too terrible. So generally speaking, I'm not really worrying about it right now. If we had mixed lighting conditions though, then you really want a color checker. You really want to be very exact with your lights. And the easiest thing to do is to have lights that are flexible in their color and match them to whatever your environmental light is. For right now, we're playing because we have the ability to, but if you're ever shooting outdoors and you're bringing another light into it, make sure it can do daylight equivalent color. So while I work with the sound guys here, just to get them set up with the boom pole, I'm going to take the color card. I'm going to have you hold it since we're focused on you. And what we're going to do is we're going to have this right in front of your face. And for our camera op, can you just make sure that that's in focus, that color card? All right. So let's see if you can hold it around the edge as best as possible. So we're going to, let's roll the camera for a second just to get this here. And whoever's logging, can we just reference that we have a shot here that's a color card for setup B? If you could take that color card, I'm going to have you just a little bit go left, right, up, down. And this gives the editor who's going to do the color correction enough information to say how do these colors look in shadow, in highlight, etc. You should be good there. We can cut that. So using this card, I can go in when I edit later, and I can say, again, here's what they should all be, relatively speaking. Another tool I have on this is just if anyone likes to buy toys. Has anyone ever heard of a light meter or color meter? There's this toy here that's specifically just for iOS or iPhones, but this little guy here, this stupid little thing is like a couple $100, but you plug this into your phone, and with the app it comes with, it will act as a light meter, a color meter. I can hold this up underneath these lights above us, or the sun, shade, whatever. It will tell me exactly what color temperature I'm dealing with, and I can match my lights to that exactly. Again, not cheap, but it's a good investment to have. To buy one that isn't like an iPhone-based one could be like over $1,000. So for a couple $100, I have one that plugs into my phone, and I just keep it attached to my color card, so I've got it all in one kit to go whenever I'm ready. So I'll give this back to one of you guys here. Visually, we're about set up for this here. Again, for the sake of time, we're just going to do a full take of the whole thing. When he stands up to shout and walk off, we're not going to tilt up to follow him right now. So you guys hang tight for a second. I'm going to touch base with you guys to get you set up with the boom pole here. No worries. So that can actually go back in the case because we have this mount right here. I'm just going to pop this guy through. You can run a microphone, a shotgun mic like this off of a battery, or if your camera or recorder has what's called phantom power, you can actually have it send power through the audio cable into the microphone, which is what we're going to do here in this case. It gives you like one less thing to think about generally. Again, for a small, easy, quick shoot, I'd probably just wire any of these microphones into the camera because that camera can take two. If you have a smaller camera that doesn't have an XLR input, a recorder like this is a great option. There's versions of this starting at like $200, $250 that can take up to 4 microphones. You can even use it for things like band recordings, get instruments, mics into it all at the same time. So we've got that here. I'm going to keep the lav microphones on you guys. They are going to show up on camera. I'm just going to deal with that because we're speeding through a bit, and it'll be a backup microphone for us in case this doesn't come out well. For this pole here, do you want a boom op for this one?
Sure.
All right, so each section, you loosen, extend, tighten. Pretty simple. We'll go about like 8 to 10 feet with this, just so there's enough distance for you to be well out of frame.
Okay.
And then if you can hold this for a second, we're going to take an XLR cable here. I should have enough to run us all the way back to this audio recorder. So you can actually do that. Having a boom operator sets it up so that, for example, when Morgan stands up to storm off, the boom operator can lift it up to move with him and stay active with where he is in the shot. Relatively speaking, if it was on a tripod, he stands up and the microphone's now pointing away from his face, you're going to lose that audio. So yeah, we may not be using the video from once he stands up, but for all we know, his best performance all night is going to be the one where we don't have his face in frame, but the audio is great from it. So I'll always have the option, at least then, where I can take the audio from the shot, put it on something else. So contingencies are always good to plan for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take like a little wide area here. I'm going to see, can you rotate that pole around? We're going to feed the cable around it a bit. Yep. I'll just make sure we have a little slack up top, and then I'm just going to go, whoop. And that should be good. So we're going to hand this off. If you could take this and head over towards their general direction right there. I'm going to spool out cable to you as we go. So for the boom pole, I'll need basically you and the camera folks to work together here. So we're going to put you opposite of where the light is for a second. So if you come to this side of me, I'm going to say, we're going to have you in here for Morgan. I'm going to tilt this down a little bit. So most of the air conditioning sound is coming from back there. So we'll probably get you about this is a pretty decent direction. So you want to get as close to him as you can get without showing up in frame. And it's up to you guys to let him know when he's too close. And another trick you can do is if you're worried about that side, when people talk, their voice doesn't stop at the edge of their mouth. It projects outwards a little bit. So you do actually have the ability to aim this a few inches in front of where his face is here. I want to go more than like 5 or 6 inches, but you can go a little bit in front and I will still capture decently. Sometimes aiming it just a little bit in front of the mouth will also help prevent plosives. So it's like kind of sounds. So aiming it a little bit in front of the mouth does work pretty well. So we think we're at a pretty good distance there. You're not seeing him in camera. How are the audio levels looking, Justin, on that third? So he's got a bit of a range in his volume level here. We'll bring it up to about here. We may get a little too much. If we have more time, I'll try to set up a compressor, which will kind of cap off at a certain point, smooth out his peaks and stuff, but we don't have time. So.
Move the boom mic with the voices, or he just leaves it in one place?
Pretty much the same place, unless he stands up. So your job is basically going to be to keep it roughly in the same distance from him. Now, if he's about to get louder like he does at the end, you can move this away from him a little bit. You can actually somewhat control how much volume you're capturing.
Give him headphones?
If you want to come over here with the recorder, we can absolutely do that. So this is all mobile. Unfortunately, I have these other things dangling, but
I'll figure out a way to hold these.
you know what? I have a cart. Excuse me. Yes. This is how I always keep on set either what I refer to as a shit cart or a shit box. It is just a box or a cart.
Are you the second audio guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's our mixer right now.
So basically, you give him the headphones, you monitor the levels. Yep. Gold.
And between the two of you, you're a functional unit.
No, both ears. You don't want to hear anything else. Yeah. No, that is right.
Block out the rest of the world. All right. And again, from a sound standpoint, he doesn't need to hear anything that isn't through those headphones. From a directing standpoint, when you guys start acting, I'm not going to look at you. I'm going to look at that TV over there. So it's all about what the mics and what the camera are capturing. Whatever else is happening on the set doesn't really matter that much, frankly. So let's say Morgan's the good guy and we want him to appear a little less shifty or a little less scary, quote unquote. To get rid of some of those shadows on his face, I'm going to bring in a reflector here. There's a couple kinds of these. Who wants to be additional lighting person for the moment? Grips? Who do you have for grips? All right. I haven't handed you something yet, so we'll hand you a thing here. So we have a couple options here. This is a foldable reflector. These guys can actually collapse and get folded up to take with you, relatively small. And just pop them out when you get on set, and it's reversible. So I've got a white side, a gold side. I can flip it inside out. I've got a silver side. For this, a white side should do nicely. If we were really worried about making it look tan, we could flip to the gold side, but this will be softer. So if you want to come in here with this, that guy's like 40 or 50 bucks from B&H. You can also go to Home Depot though and buy foam insulation that is silver on one side and white on the other, and a thing twice the size costs me 15 bucks. So here, we'll use this one. Actually, I like this one better sometimes.
Really?
Yeah. The only problem is it had branding for the name of the insulation company here. I had to peel it off by hand, which kind of sucked. But using this, you can kind of play this off of that light. So if you look on the screen for a second there and just look straight ahead to your opposite person, if you look at the shadows on that side of his face and I bring this in, see that? It's not a lot, but it's just enough to make him look a little less sketchy. And because he's sort of our hero character, we'll kind of use him for that. So I'm going to have you hang on to this for the duration of this shot. I do have special stands that can hold these for him, but I want to give everyone a job. So, hey. All right. So we have a pretty nice looking shot here. It's going to probably sound pretty good. I'm going to drop this intensity on his face just a little bit. So for you guys here, there's a dial on this one. If you just turn that counterclockwise, we'll drop our intensity. I'm going to watch this as we go. Little bit more, and that looks about good there. I think our histogram looks about the same as what we had before, relatively speaking. It's definitely on the low side, but it's about the effect we're going for. So I'm really happy with how this looks. How's it sound?
Sounds good.
Perfect. All right. So let's get our slate and our log sheet ready.
Okay. So I wrote scene 1 the last time, so that's scene
You
A.
know what?
Should I just do it
For roll here, I'm going to call roll the setup, so we'll make this B right here. See, these are the shots. So we're deviating from the shot list and kind of saying, screw it, we're just going to get the whole thing over again. So normally if I was getting just the moment he stands up, then I would have the shot number match what's on the shot list. For this case, I'm just going to do by setup A, B, C, take 1, 2, 3. It'll be easier for how we're doing it right now. It's fine. I believe you. That's me. Okay, we're adapting. We're adapting as we go. That's what it's all about. All right, so let's roll camera and roll audio. Both rolling?
Yep.
Perfect. Let's grab that slate.
Roll B, scene 2, take 1.
All right. And let's take it from the two of you standing just as you're sitting. So we're going to take it from just after the take a seat. You can even say take a seat, and then you'll sit and you'll say your next line. Sound good? All right. And action.
Take a seat. Thanks, Sir Parker. Well, please, call me Charlie.
Great. Thanks, Charlie.
Do you know why we've invited you here this evening?
I can't say that I do.
been through this before, Morgan.
As I stated in the past, it's not me.
Then why do we have you on camera stealing pens from the supply closet?
They are pens, Charlie. Nobody cares! God damn it!
Awkward.
And cut. Great job, guys. All right. So as always, let's do one more for luck, and then we'll get.
Touch your face in the wide.
I did touch my face. No, I did touch my face. I was fidgety with the hands a little bit. So I was trying to remember where I touched it. Because I know that when I first sat down, I was trying to figure out why the heck I was here. So I was trying to think of continuity.
Yeah. Again, for the most part, we're gonna live in these closer up shots versus the wide. But again, we'll find out later if there's a continuity issue. On a lot of sets, they do have sort of a continuity manager who will be there just to keep an eye out for these things. They'll have a copy of the script and they'll be constantly noting, hey, so on the master take we did, that wide, you did right leg over left and you touched your face when you said the pens line or something like. They would have someone doing that and reminding you so you can do it every time from there on out. And that's how granular some of these jobs get. So a lot of the shoots we do around here, I've done all of this with just me or me and one other guy. That's how we usually operate most of the time. And we simplify the setup to an extent, but when you have the people to work with, this is a great experience. And the biggest crew I've ever had for a shoot was, I think, 20 some odd people. So we had a few lighting, camera, sound folks. We had PAs for days. I was sitting there as a director in the morning just going, what do I do? So when you do come into a situation like that, it is nice to have the people helping. And as you get more experience, I've worked with crews where the camera guy and the lighting guy know each other really well. And I can say, okay, so the next shot's going to be a medium over his shoulder. I want to have Rembrandt lighting with a reflector set up over here. Can you guys get that started? Great. And then I'll go work with the actors on their motivation, their internal monologue, etc. And I know those guys are going to get it at least 90% of where I want it to be before I come to check back in with them again. And then maybe I'll come back and say, okay, it's looking really good. Can we just tweak the direction on this or move this thing over here? And like, that's it. So when you have a really good crew who gets to know each other and works really well together, it speeds up the whole switchover process. So we're going a little slow today because we're teaching as we go here, but generally speaking, it's not, it's easy to kind of speed up these processes once you have people who have the flow down, sort of. So we're gonna do one more take of this. We'll switch the setup real quick. I might get the stand up and storm off shot just for fun of him because that would be a fun shot to get before we change the setup. So we'll do one more take of the same thing. This one is going to be a version of the over-the-shoulder. We're going to take it a little closer maybe and maybe change lenses one more time just to get you kind of standing up and like standing over and being like go fuck yourself. And then, same line we've been saying, but there's your internal monologue right there. Okay, so, yes?
Would it be ideal to have like also a reflector here? Because he looks like a blob.
So, yes. Opportunely, we want to give him a little bit of lift, I'd call it, to fill in the shadows. So what we can do here is, I mentioned we had some other lights before. Don't throw the lights. That should have been lesson one. So this is one of the larger Luxley lights here. This is the cello, I believe. So this actually has a nice little soft box built into it to kind of soften the light, similar to the lantern. But it is small. I can set it to any color I want. And if I put the thing on right, so again, I can come in here and we can actually have someone just hold this right here. Not that intense, but so I'm going to set this to the same temperature as that light, 5600 Kelvin, and I'm going to turn the intensity way down here. So just a little bit there, just to give a little bit of lift. Yeah. So, thank you very much. That was great. And again, I could put this on a tripod. I could have a poor soul hold it for me. Thank you very much for that. So we'll do the shot relatively quick so he doesn't have to stand there forever. But, so, let's roll.
Was that peaking? By the way, did that peak on the screen? No.
Justin, when he did the yell at the end before, do that. All right. So when he does that, can you pull the mic like 2 or 3 feet up? So you'll kind of control the volume like from a physical standpoint. So that should work pretty nicely there. All right, let's roll camera and roll audio. Both up to speed. Okay, let's slate it.
Roll B, scene 2, take 2.
All right, we'll start from that standing position just like before. Great job. And action.
Take a seat. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Oh, please, call me Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie.
Do you know why we've called you in this evening?
Can't say that I do.
We've been through this before, Morgan.
And in the past, I've told you, it wasn't me.
Then why do we have you stealing pens from the supply closet?
They are pens, Charlie. Nobody cares.
Let's take it. Let's just take it from that same line again here. No, no worries. So you've been doing this. They're pens, Charlie. Stand. Nobody cares. Again, and just give him that space right as he says it here. So we're gonna start from that same line. So just get ready to pull back on that. All right. So we'll go in 3, 2, 1.
They are pens, Charlie. Nobody cares.
And cut. How's that level looking to you this time when he did the
You
L?
might want to just dial it down for that whole.
Okay, so we'll do next, before we change setups here, we're gonna do one more take of the standing up, just looking up at him when he stands, and we'll actually adjust the volume levels too to balance out the yelling. And that way we'll have a couple versions to cut between there. So for this, we're doing pretty much the same setup. We just wanna have you stand up a sec. And for now, can you just loosen the tilt and just tilt up towards him? We'll probably switch lenses, but that's not bad there, okay. So let's adjust this around a little bit. So if one of you can hold this 2 hands, the other can loosen the knob once you've got it up here. If we work together, we're gonna take it away from him a little bit. That should be good. And once that's tightened, this bulb here, you can actually just gently rotate this. So that's a nice and easy adjustment to be able to make. This here, we're gonna wanna do this a little bit higher just to fill in those shadows again. I'm gonna actually get you the adapter so you don't have to hold it up. Which stand do I want? All right. So we got a fun toy here. This is called a duckbill or a platypus clamp. And I know what you're thinking. It's just a vice grip with some shit welded onto it. That's absolutely what it is. They charge too much for these things, but they last forever. So once you have it, you don't need to worry about a whole lot else. And what we're gonna do with this basically is I'm gonna pop it into a C stand, and I'm gonna do a bit of a rotation to get a decent angle for it. And if you could place that right about in there. Okay, and then I can go whoop. And a quick way to test this, if you step back for a second, I'm gonna rotate this away and then towards, and we can see that effect pretty easily. They'll often refer to that as flying something in or flying something out. So you're flying it out just to get rid of it, then fly it back in again. So they'll say fly this light in, fly this reflector out. I actually went to a class one time with like a professional cinematographer, and whenever he liked the lighting, he said woof. Still don't know why to this day, but that was his thing. So we have this set up here. You no longer have to hold it. That works out well. We're not really seeing this gentleman in the shot anymore, so we can probably scrap this here. I've got somewhere on it, I've got a power button. Oh. All right, so that if you want to put it back on the table, you'll be all set there for the moment. So we're gonna take this from, we'll take it from your prior line, just kind of key him off, give him something to react to there. So why do we have you on camera stealing pens from the supply room? And you're just gonna go through the whole thing. They're pens. You'll start sitting and you're gonna rise up into frame here. But we're gonna turn down the volume on the recorder this time. So drop it down a little bit. Let's do a test.
Do you want to maybe go from up, maybe, since I'll...
I'm not gonna do that in this room just because the vents up here are gonna pick up all that air conditioning. But yeah.
Stand up, it's going to be further away, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll drop the level down on the recorder, I think. So why don't you stand up for a second just so we can do a test from there. Again, feel free to have that be like a couple good feet away. Still minus 12? It could be a little bit louder than that. All right. Give me one more of those pained, agonizing screams there.
They are pens.
Nice. All right, that should be pretty good. All right, I like it.
Nobody fucking cares.
All right. All right. Are we feeling pretty good about this framing and stuff? Okay. I'm not going to worry about changing lens right now. Normally I'd go a little wider. Yeah. Yeah, I would probably take this to a 35 generally. A little bit, yeah. Again, it's going to denote that he's standing over him a little, so I'm okay with that there. But yeah, so I think I'm pretty happy with this framing and everything right now. So we're going to move on with this. Are we ready? Audio, sound, camera? Yep. All right. We'll knock this one out real quick. We'll do probably just like a oneer of this. You're going to get this perfect on the first try, right? One and done. I like it. All right. And then Then we'll do a really quick reverse. We don't have to move any lights here. We're just going to move the reflector and the camera. We'll get that last setup. So, yep, that looks good right there. All right, let's roll camera, roll sound. Perfect. Let's slate.
Roll B, scene 7, take 1.
Perfect. Frame is clear, and action.
Then why do we have you on camera stealing pens from the supply closet?
They are pens, Charlie. Nobody fucking cares! God damn it!
Awkward.
All right, cut. All right. That was really good, guys. Thank you. Oh, man. So we lost. So again, I'm going to keep us moving here. We lost focus on him a little bit when he leaned forwards. If we wanted to really counteract that, I could have opened up my depth of field a little bit so you'd could have a bit more leeway.
Keep it rolling.
We can do
Come on, let's get this.
Okay. So actually 5.6. So 5.6 is a little wider anyway. I don't want to bring the ISO any higher. This is already 800, which is our native, so I don't want to play with that too much. Another option is, can you do it just slightly in forwards for me?
Nobody.
Yeah. So I'm focusing a little bit more on that closer range there. And can you go back to your first position again? Back. Oh.
They are pens, Charlie. Nobody fucking cares.
That's actually a pretty good range right there. All right. So we have a nice range. All right. So we'll do this one last time. Just take it. So why do we have you on camera stealing pens? We'll abbreviate your version of the line to get his a little quicker. All right. Let's roll camera, roll sound. And slate.
Roll B, scene 7, take 2.
And action.
Why do we have you on camera stealing pens?
They are pens, Charlie. Nobody fucking cares! God damn it!
Awkward.
Cut. Beautiful. All right. Let's go in for our last setup here. So the light can pretty much stay where it is. We're just going to take the camera and we're going to put it to the opposite side. Good job, guys. Bam, bam. All right. All right. I'll grab the cables here.
I've seen the over-the-shoulder one.
Good.
Oh,
Oop. Okay, we're all right. Duck the lantern. All right. Yep. So we got that there. Somewhere around here I got more power. Can one of our grips grab that wide extension cord for me? We're going to set that up over here for the camera. You can unplug it. I have another power strip here we'll use to run it off to this guy. Quick note on power for lighting. The fact that all these lights are LED now, one of these lights traditionally at 2,000 watts of power, that would be probably the only thing I'd be plugging into an outlet. But because of the fact that it's all LED, I could actually have this and those two other panels easily running off the same circuit and not have a high likelihood of tripping anything. I've never been an electrician. I don't know the math well enough to know how far you can push your luck with that. That being said, though, and we're going to run this right back to over here. I should have a power strip.
you want both of those plugged into the white?
Yep, that's perfect right there. We might need to pull the power strip a little closer, and we can unplug that other light at this point, too, if we need to. All right, so we're going to just reverse the setup a little bit here. So let's loosen and rotate this away from our Charlie. That should be good right there. I'll rotate the bulb. And you'll notice the inside of the sheet around the lantern is all reflective, so it's really trying to not waste any energy. It's pushing it all in one direction best we can here. All right, so because the boss man is kind of the scary figure in this, we're going to get rid of this altogether here. So if we can pull this all the way off to the side, if you want, we can loosen and lower it first, make it a little easier. I'll even detach this guy. All right, so I can go off to the side. I'll put this over here as well. So we'll leave him a bit more shadowy because he's the guy we're kind of scared of a little bit. So we got that here. Can we get our Morgan back in frame?
We'll have to move those guys in the back.
Yes, we will indeed. Okay. So we're going to have to move over and a little closer, I think. Yep, you got that there. Let's go. Yeah, let's go over to the right a little bit because I'm not seeing any of Morgan. All right, so We're going to clear the folks standing in this corner because we are seeing them in the background here. I'm going to clear this light out of frame. All right, so one other note while we're finishing this setup here. This is yet another thing that we were a little tight on time, so I didn't get into. A lot of scene choice plays with the psychology of how the audience picks up on shots. And one of the things I had wanted to do was once we got to these over the shoulders, I wanted to constantly give the perception that Charlie is taller than Morgan. One way we can do that is we can actually prop him up on his chair a little bit with either a box or something and shoot a little bit lower on this side, so when we're looking at Charlie, we're looking upwards towards him. It makes him seem more like an authority figure. And same thing, we would have left him propped up in the opposite shot, so that way he's looking down on Morgan at all times. Again, not enough time, too many things to talk about, so I didn't really get into it. If we want to, just for funsies though, I have what's here, it's called an Apple box. Let's give you a little height boost real quick here, just to see how this works. It's not going to be quite as comfortable here. And let's tilt that camera up towards him a little bit here. And if need be, let's actually lower the legs a little. That way we're really kind of looking up to him here. Just kind of wiggling it down here. Down. Gonna lock it in about here. We'll check that level again. There's a little button on this tripod to give us light. Are we off?
No, we're off.
Yeah,
so
we're off.
bubbles on our side,
This
so
way.
we want to either
This
raise
one.
that side up.
Yeah.
You can do it by the legs, or you could do it by this knob underneath.
Okay.
I got the camera. So if you loosen this knob underneath instead of the individual legs, that'll just kind of let the head rotate a bit.
So
Yeah, that's fine. No.
forward a little bit.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. So we're going to want to tilt up a little bit again to make sure we're clearing that shoulder. Let's have you looking forwards back at him again there if we could.
And then tilt it to the right or something?
Yeah, we'll turn to the right a little bit, and let's also shift the tripod over just a hair because he's got a lot of head in frame. A little bit. Yeah. Another option we can do is here. Let's scrap the wood box for a second here. Lighting cases are also very sturdy here. We're going to put the chair on top of the chair legs on top of these guys here.
Damn, you gonna be tall, bro? In this one shot.
Not quite making it, unfortunately. The safety guy in me is saying this isn't a great idea. All right, we're going to scrap the idea. But generally, it's all right.
Will it go the other way,
Yeah,
in between the legs?
The other way with space between the two. Yeah, like that, but.
I can't see shit. What if you just put
Set safety. We could do a human pyramid too. That's another option.
It'll be fun. No, you're gonna definitely eat shit.
Yeah,
If I'm gonna sit into this for the shot, absolutely. Yeah. Don't move. Yeah, I can chill, but.
Well, the previous shot we had the two of you sitting from like over your shoulder, so I think we'll keep that because he has that first line once you guys sit. So editing-wise, that should work. I'm still feeling a little precarious with this. Are you feeling safe? That's thing number one.
Yeah.
Where's that
Yeah?
release waiver?
Wait a second. Like I said, if we break it, we buy it. So in case if we break him, then I bought it. So,
I'm staying.
all right. So we're gonna tie this up here. 'Cause I'm sure everyone wants to get out of here for the night. It's already 8:30. So. Yeah, so we're pretty much set up here. The shot is looking about where I want it to. We've got some stuff in our background, but again, at this point, we can only be so artsy-fartsy with the time we have left. So that looks pretty clear. We have a decent shot. He's a little shadowy, but we still have decent light on his face. I'm pretty happy with this. Are we good to go with the boom mic, same way we did it before? The same, but opposite, you know? All right. All right. Yes.
Where should we go?
So for this one here, same basic thing as before. We'll come this way. Again, the air conditioners are all over there, so we can come this way pointing at his face. We should still be good. Yeah. And we'll get as close as we can while still being out of frame.
Did you want your little light on the side of his face?
Yeah.
Watch your cable.
We could potentially do that with the reflector also, strictly speaking.
Either way.
All right. That large red button on this side right there. All right. And we'll just checking how the camera looks. Can our camera operator let him know when this light's in a good position? So we want to bring it to the side of his face over here.
Too bright, I think.
A little too bright? Okay, so one of these dials here. That's already pretty low. So that should be okay right there, I think. Yeah, that works.
Do we want to bring in a flag to make it even less light on that side of his face?
We could do that. I do still have the flag back here. Yeah, we'll creep him out just a little bit extra. So we had one of these flags earlier. I'll let you bring this in since you had the idea. We just watch our height there with the ceiling.
So I'm going in between you guys?
Yes. So what we're doing right here is in this room, even though it is a dark room, we're still getting some reflection of light from the rest of the room hitting the dark side of his face. And since we want the face to stay dark, we're going to bring in this flag to kind of, it won't go down any lower there, but we can rotate this piece around. So if I do this real quick. All right, so we're basically just rotating this around to flex it a bit. This one here, the bottom knuckle is actually broken, so we will use the top one in this case. It's lightweight anyway, so I'm not too worried about the weight factor. So I bring in this black flag on the side of his face. It's actually going to intensify those shadows a little bit more than they already were. It probably won't have a huge effect, but it'll also cut some of the light on the side of the pillar for one thing. That's actually helping the pillar enough. I'd be happy enough with that for right now, I think, for blocking that light here. All right, so feeling pretty good there. We have a bit more contrast on his face because we're a little scared of him. He's a little taller up. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about how this looks here. So we got our slate ready, perfect. And let's just take it from the please call me Charlie. Yeah. So you're already sitting. So start with your line. It's with thank you, Mr. Parker. Yeah. So we'll start from thank you, Mr. Parker. We'll come into yours. You guys ready on audio? All right. Audio recording. Roll camera. Yep. Let's slate it.
Roll scene 3, take 1.
And action.
Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Please, call me Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie.
Do you know why we've asked you here this evening?
I can't say that I do.
We have discussed this before, Morgan.
As I stated in the past, wasn't me.
Then why do we have you on camera stealing pens from the supply closet?
They are pens, Charlie. Nobody gives them.
Awkward.
All right, cut. Threw him for a loop there. All right, let's do a.
You want to laugh
Because like
during
we're
the
trying to
thing.
catch
That's
the
the
audio
top,
on that one, right? Or do you want me to do the?
We are. You don't have to go necessarily full volume because again, he's just reacting facially at that point. So there's nothing. You're not stepping on his line. Yeah.
Loud with the face.
Yeah. So.
My concern was stepping up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Yeah.
So when you step up, if you bear to the right a little bit, you're fine to still be in frame. No ass crack shot, right? All right. So I'd say when you stand up, stand to the right just a little bit there, just so you clear frame for him and we have his facial reaction still. All right. Let's get ready for the next take. All right. Roll camera, roll sound. Good. Let's slate.
Take 2.
Clearing frame and action.
Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Please, call me Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie.
Do you know why we've asked you here this evening?
I can't say that I do.
We have discussed this before, Morgan.
And as I stated in the past, it wasn't me.
Then why do we have you on camera stealing pens from the supply closet?
They are pens, Charlie. Nobody gives a fuck.
Awkward.
All right. Cut. That was good. All right.
Whatever. Nobody cares.
All right. And that works. We have all the takes of you saying it from the other angle, so that's perfectly fine there. Let me see if there's anything else funky I wanted to get, but that's pretty much it. I'm going to say let's do one final shot just to give us a little spice. We got a spicy shot of him before. We'll get a spicy shot of you now. So what we're going to do here is, can someone bring over that lens kit we had before? Excellent. So I want to take this one over here. We're going to bring it low. If we have to scrap power on this, I'm fine with it. We're basically going to get this one low and all up in his business and put a wide angle lens on it. It's going to make him look like a giant in frame. And this is going to be the line where you confirm, then why do we have you on camera stealing pens from the supply room? Yep, we'll move this first. Yeah, should I do this for safety? Okay. So we're going to get this in. Let's go to about here, I'm going to say. And we're going to do this 24 millimeter lens.
Going back to 24.
Yep. I'm going to spin this little hood around here just so it goes safely back in the case. All right.
Is there a button to release it?
Yeah. So if you want to see this too, when we switch the lenses here, there's a button on the side, the silver button. Okay. This will disengage the lock, and we spin and remove. Yep. It's the same cap that goes for each lens. And there's this little red dot here.
Yeah.
Matches with the red dot on the camera itself at 12 o'clock. We place that in, rotate till it clicks, and this hood we just rotate and put back on to block light from coming in through the sides. So we have this wider lens now. So we can make this a little bit lower. So let's, we're going to do this in 2 steps here. So first step, we're going to loosen these guys here if you want to get the other one on that side. And we'll bring this all the way down from this direction here. And then I'm also going to come down this particular tripod. You can widen out the legs, which also gives us. Actually, you know what? Who wants to do something really freaky? All right, I got an even better idea. All right. Do we have one of those larger sandbags over by that pillar over there? There should be a. That's good. All right. We are going to. We're going to make a little custom camera rig here real quick. These are Apple boxes. I freaking love these. These are basically just use them for anything. You can lay them on the ground, use them as a chair, you can staple or nail stuff to them. I'm going to come in here because we want a really low angle, but we want it to be stable. We're going to make a little custom camera mount here using sandbags and Apple boxes. So, hold this please for a second. I'm going to take the camera off the tripod here. And this is our last shot, so this is going to be our time to experiment a little bit. Clear?
Clear.
All right. So I've basically used the sandbag because I can plant the camera into it kind of and make it a bit more rigid. I might still throw in a clamp or something to add me a little safety for myself here. But generally speaking, I'm setting up a custom sort of low angle rig here. And we're actually going to carefully bring this whole thing closer to our actor. But if you see that on the screens now, we're literally making him look like a giant when he confronts his opponents with the evidence here. And then one other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to tighten up our depth of field quite a bit. I'm going to open up my aperture. We're just going to soften focus until I clean it up. So this shot is going to be a little bit brighter than the previous ones because I opened up my aperture. I'm not turning down the ISO, but this is an easy enough shot to take down the brightness in post. Raising brightness in post almost never works. You can darken any shot in post, but you don't want to try to brighten a shot too much if you can help it. I shot a dark scene like this a while back, and the exposure was double what we're shooting right now, and I just darkened it all in editing. That's like the best way to go about this, but again, for quickness sake, we're going just a couple lights at a time here, keeping it real simple. So we're shooting into the shadowy side of his face, makes him look a bit more ominous. We've got this funky angle here. It's a wide angle lens. It distorts a little bit. There's this mild fisheye effect on it. So it's going to be an uncomfortable looking shot, and it's going to make him look like a giant compared to his opposition here. And this will add to that psychological feeling of him going, God damn it, no one cares, leave me alone. Because it's going to feel very oppressive with this guy coming down on him like this. So that's the psychology we're going for here with this shot. So I've got a good focus on the edges of his face, the lights in his eyes. We see we have a nice little focus point right there. So I'm generally, okay. So I'm gonna have you sort of still handle the recording, but you're gonna sort of spot this. So it's gonna be mostly pretty stable, but just keep a hand nearby just in case. So we're pretty good there for this shot because we don't want to tussle the camera too much. You can also hit this gray dot here on the screen. That'll be like a little soft touch record button. So do we feel good to get this last bit? Okay, Okay. So actually, can you take a step back for a sec? Because I didn't notice it before you stepped in there. So that definitely isn't bad. We could flag that out, but like you said, I kind of dig it for this. It makes it look a little bit more epic and stuff. So we have a lens flare now, guys. It's a Michael Bay movie now. Woo! All right. So let's roll camera, roll audio. We'll slate this and get this last big shot here, and then we should be about good. All right. Camera and sound both rolling? Yep. Good. Let's slate. And we'll start from the line right before he confronts you. I told you before, it's not me. All right. And 3, 2, 1, action.
And I told you before, it's not me.
Then why do we have you on camera stealing pens from the supply closet?
They are pens, Morgan. Oh, sorry.
Yes, they are.
All right. So we're gonna clean up your eye line just a little bit here. Can you look towards his pocket right here?
Okay.
It's a little high still. Take it more towards, and you can turn your head in this direction also. So feel free. Go for his elbow, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that eye line looks better on camera right there, so we're gonna go with that. It's gonna be a little awkward, but let's use that as the eye line. We'll still take it from your line before. We'll still take it from your line before, but let's take this straight through the awkward at the end, okay? All right. Did we cut before? We didn't? Okay, let's cut now. We could keep rolling through in some cases, but we will take a cut here and start on a fresh take. Now let's roll. Slate. And action.
And as I said before, it wasn't me.
Then why do we have you on camera stealing pens from the supply closet?
They are pens, Charlie. Nobody gives a goddamn about them. What did I say?
Awkward.
All right, let's cut. Let's do one more for luck, and then we'll call it a wrap.
Nobody fucking cares.
Just making shit up. There's a script for a reason. All right. All right. Last take.
All right, here we go.
Love it or hate it. Here we're going. All right. Ready? Let's roll camera, roll sound. Slate.
Take 3.
And action.
As I told you before, it wasn't me.
Then why do we have you on camera stealing pens from the supply closet?
They are pens, Charlie. Nobody fucking cares.
Awkward.
Cut. I'm going to call it a wrap, guys. All right. So we're going to get this just disengaged and put on a safe spot on the cart right here. All right. Let's, can you unplug those 2 cables? All right. All right, we got those. I'm going to put this here. We should be, do we have that lens cap? Perfect. All right. All right, so let's get everyone disconnected from their microphones. Good job, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome job. Way to get into it. Let's get the mics off if we could here. I'll disconnect this. Oh, yep, that's fine. That can go on the cart. Yeah, so who here learned something today? It's a pretty good rate. I like it. All right, cool. I dig it. You learned nothing? Come on. All right, so so this was very intensive. It was very fast. I do apologize sort of for how much we had to speed through things, but I hope at least some of the information was absorbable. As we went through the night, are there any things that anyone had questions on? Oh, I saw you first. We'll get you next.
How many different jobs have you done tonight? Like, what was your role as like your title, director, producer?
So I was trying to operate somewhere between director of photography, aka cinematographer, and teacher as well was what I was kind of aiming for. So that was what I was gearing towards. I know for some people I jumped in on things real quick. Again, it's just because it's expensive equipment and I'm responsible for it. So I wasn't because I didn't have any confidence in anyone. It was just me practicing as much safety as I could. But thank you all for helping me handle the heavy gear, the light gear, and everything in between. I think these shots all came out awesome. And I love doing it with the screens because everyone got a good preview as to how it looked as we went. And hopefully that gives you an idea of why we set up the lights a certain way and why we put the stupid chair up on boxes and all those other things there. As I said, I've done lots and lots and lots of shoots where I've been doing all of these jobs, or it's me and 1 to 2 other guys doing these jobs. And we've done not only all like the production spots, but we've started branching into when we shoot a shot in an office. The office stuff is boring, so we'll start throwing some lights in the background. We'll put a plant somewhere. Sometimes I'll take a vase and I'll fill it full of Legos from the Lego wall over here, just so there's like a splash of color in the shot. That's production design. We didn't do too much of that today, but one of the reasons why I set up the wide shot where I did was because I thought the chairs in the background looked kind of cool. They added texture to the scene and whatnot. All those angles we did with the over the shoulders, things where we're not shooting directly at someone's face, those are all a lot more visually interesting than if you just shoot someone directly dead on. And so the rule of thirds applies to that too. It tells the audience where the character's looking, where they should be looking. These are all considerations of kind of the psychology of shooting film, and that leads into like the cinematography, and lighting's a big part of that, picking how harsh we make the shadows on one character versus another, etc. So I was hoping to get across a little bit more than just the basics of here's how to turn on a light, here's how to focus a camera, and give a bit of the whys of things. And I hope that came across. So if anyone was interested in this, I'm going to, at some point in the next week or two, I'll knock out an edit of this just so we have an idea of how it all came together. I'll post that on Vimeo, and I'll do a comment on the meetup page. That way anyone on that page can kind of just jump back to the invite thing and they can get a link to the video. And if there's enough interest, I might ask if Neil wants to have me come back and do a version of this where we get into the editing process next for how to edit all this footage together. So that might be something we do in the future. I did have one of these classes previously, which I do have a Vimeo link for. I can comment down on the meetup page as well. Actually, it was already in the meetup page, like my previous link, and it was a bit more of just a lecture, but it was a bit of everything. So it dealt with a little bit of color correction and a little bit of how to edit and how to organize your media and whatnot. So it was a bit of shooting, a bit of editing. We discussed 3-point lighting there. It's a bit more in-depth on depth of field. No pun intended. And yeah, so there is some other content I already have out there, and if this continues and there's enough interest, generally speaking, I'm also planning on maybe shooting like some YouTube footage, doing like some YouTube courses online. It's something I'm planning. It's one of my goals for 2020, so hopefully before the year is out, I will have some more content that could be seen, so like little 10-minute episodes that are deep dives into focus, editing, depth of field, what have you, and we'll kind of spell that all out a little bit more. I'm going to grab my jacket from the back because I have business cards if anyone wants to reach out to me. Yes?
Are you on like Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that?
Yes. So I believe if you go to my actual website, I do have links, I think, at the bottom of the page for LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. My website kind of sucks because I'm not a web developer. I'm a video guy. So I have a couple of reels and short films and stuff on there. My Facebook page. So I'm listed everywhere as a Happenstance Productions is my silly little high schooler name I came up with because it sounded cool. That might get a rebrand when I do the YouTube content, but we'll see. But yeah, so I have happenstance-productions.com. I have an email address, happenstobe@me.com. Again, I'll put these up front for everyone. And you can search Happenstance Productions on Facebook, and I'll have a page there. That has a lot more of my frequent updates and everything. So yeah, between Facebook, my actual website, that should have links to everything. If you ever find my Instagram, it's 1/3 production behind the scenes, 1/3 food I cook because I'm that guy, and 1/3 cat pictures. So yeah, so it's a nice mix. It has a bit of everything for everybody. So I'll leave business cards up here if anyone wants one. Any more questions before we wrap up for the night? Yes.
I came down kind of cold. What do you do you work for Dado?
Yes.
And what do you do at that little thing at the very beginning? Is that kind of what you do for the company, or what you travel around and what just general
Yes.
stuff, for instance, what,
Yeah, so my role is as a production supervisor for like an internal audio video team. So if I were to break it down, it's really two parts. One is we do live productions, which is everything from in this room. We do monthly town hall meetings, like a State of the Union for the company. So we actually live broadcast all those things using the lights and cameras all around this room. Exactly, yeah, because we are an international company. So we'll live broadcast those things, and that's with a combination of people on manned cameras. We have remote control cameras. I'm usually back there doing the live editing. Jason did that for me tonight. And we've got sound, lighting, video control boards back there for live gear. None of that is my specialty. That's like something I can do, but my the world I like to live in is in shoots that involve pre and post production. So things where you plan a shoot, you go and shoot it, and then you edit it later. That's where I like to live. So there was a clip in that thing at the beginning with a flamethrower there. Sure. We had a new person taking over disaster demos, and we wanted to show how excited he was. So we say, oh, hey, Dan, you're the new disaster demo guy. And he goes, what? Like right at camera. And then it just cuts to these shots of him coming out of like a freight elevator, flamethrower in hand. He goes, ah! And it was just to show off like how excited he was about taking this thing over. A lot of what my team makes is more internal just for Datto, kind of like self-promotion or like employee engagement. So whenever we do one of these, and when we do these monthly meetings in this room, it's like a meeting everyone has to come to for an hour. So generally it's kind of boring. So each one, we start with a funny video every month for like the last 3 years. So whether it's a spoof of The Walking Dead or Full House, or we did 'Twas the Night Before Town Hall last holiday season and did the whole nursery rhyme. We did a Brady Bunch one that was terrifying. We did Gilligan's Island. So we do a bit of everything. So sometimes it's TV show spoofs, sometimes it's short skits. A lot of it is just what we did here tonight. We need a 1.5-minute thing that will make people laugh and get their attention. And we just write a quick script like we did tonight. It may have a little bit more of a point to it, but it's just that. We write a short, silly script. We storyboard it real quick. We get a couple employees who can lend us their time for an hour and a half, and we just shoot the thing. And then we play it at the next town hall. Sometimes we do it 3 days before it has to premiere. It just depends. But yeah, so that's a bit of what my life is like day to day. I do travel to different offices. I was just in Boston and California recently. I'm going to Portland, Oregon soon, and then the UK, and then Vegas, and then eventually Atlanta, and before the year's out, Germany too, I think. So I get around a bit. I'm very fortunate to be able to do that, and I've been doing this stuff since high school. I self-taught a lot of it. I love doing it. I'm a huge movie nerd. I love everything about like cinematography and all that stuff. And the fact that I get to do it is a regular 9-to-5-ish job and get benefits, I'm like, hell yeah, I like it. So I am a very fortunate person. And the fact that I work for a company that embraces this and buys cool gear to play with and really kind of make a professional statement out of what we do, it's a lot of fun. And anything that I'm really proud of, I post to my Facebook page as well. So any of like the really cool TV show spoofs and whatnot will be on my Happenstance Productions Facebook page. Anyone else tired? All right. Any other questions before we go? You had to be that guy. Sorry. Hit me. What do you got?
Any chance you could edit this same video live or like show us, because we've seen what goes into making this, and then if you could edit the same thing in front of us, that could be
for how short the overall final video would be, I could very likely do an edit. I'd probably do certain prep work in advance. Like I'd probably synchronize all the audio video clips together in advance. You can do that manually. There is a software that does it for like $300. I don't personally own it. I think Datto might have a copy, but in theory, yeah, so I would probably prep that part out first because that's just time consuming. But if that's prepped, we have our shot list and storyboard. That's our blueprint for what the final thing's going to be. So it's really just going in, using that as our map, and then taking all the footage and just dropping the pieces together. A bit of color correction just to make it look a little bit more fascinating. And yeah, so in theory, that could be another 1.5 to 2 hour class. But yeah, that is something for how short this is. I kind of did that on purpose. For how short this is, that could be feasible. So I don't know when yet, but keep an eye out for the Meetup Norwalk.io page. We have things every month. It could be anything from, Justin, you've done like a hacking class before, I think. I've seen engineers. I've seen a ham radio class, which was actually really cool. Yeah, this guy right here. So yeah, I've seen some really fantastic stuff here. So that being said, there's always cool tech topics. They're always different. But at some point in the future, I'd love to come back and do a post-production class. And And no one really needs the pre-production class because that's the boring part with the script and storyboard. If anyone does want that software for the storyboards, it's again just Storyboarder. If you just Google search that, Storyboarder. It's Windows, Mac compatible, totally free. Bit of a learning curve. It does bug out. It does crash because it's a free program. But it's I wrote the script in about 20 minutes. I did the storyboard in about an hour. And the shot list like another 15, 20 minutes after that. So yeah, it's a good workflow for short stuff. Cool. All right. Well, thank you all very, very much for coming. Thank you, my supportive people, for staying and hanging out with me. Yeah, I hope you had a good time. And if you want business cards, I got them right up front here.